Should be good.
Okay, we're
Yeah.
good,
We
and
just
we
got
have,
the thumbs up from Emily.
and we have a quorum, and everyone can hear us in Zoom world. All right, great. So it's 6:37. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Welcome. It's nice to see everyone. I hope you all had a lovely Thanksgiving holiday. To start with, we have our consent agenda, which includes our prior minutes, and a second read on a number of policies. Any discussion about the consent agenda? All right, I'll make a motion to accept. We'll do that by roll. Kat? Ooh. Emily?
Where's the sound coming from?
Yeah, should be coming from here. And Aaron, I thought I saw Aaron. Oh, you are there, okay. I don't see your,
We changed the view.
all right, Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Great, thank you. All right, so that brings us to our public comment. Jared, would like to talk tonight? Yes, please.
Good evening. I want you to imagine that you send your young, impressionable child, your innocent son or your precious daughter, over to a friend's house for the day to play. You've only briefly met the other child's parents, and you've never been inside of their home. Now, in their home, the adults have many fun and enticing posters of rainbows, bright sunshine, and colorful unicorns. They include descriptions of different sexualities, genders, and with messaging of join a community that believes in the power of queer joy and glitter. Now, unbeknownst to you, your child's friend openly discusses their sexuality with the adults and invites your child to participate. It's a place where they can discern and express their sexual and gender identity on their own terms, kind of like a club. Later in the afternoon, after ensuring your child feels comfortable, the adults dress in drag and read from books like Gender Queer or Flamer, further desensitizing and attacking the innocence of your child. And at the end of the day, when your child is leaving, the adults remind your child that they are not just a friend, they are also an ally. Your young child can feel comfortable with them and trust them. And they emphasize, remember, even your parents have been told about this because it's a very sensitive topic. Now imagine that you later find out what happened that day as your young child is asking you about explicit sexual activities. You are livid. You feel that your young, impressionable child has been violated, as they've been exposed to things that you, their parent, know that they're not mature enough to handle or to fully understand. And you feel that it is your fault for allowing them to be at that house in the first place. You believe that this should be reported, but you're scared to speak out. You learn of others who have questioned these activities, and they've been called bigots, homophobes, transphobes. But this is your child, and you're aware of the dangers this ideology presents to children of all ages. And because you love your child, you have to say something. There should be accountability. Wouldn't most parents feel that way? So why are the same or similar things allowed in schools? Would you feel the same if it were religious ideologies? Schools should not be promoting or setting time aside to celebrate the sexual lifestyles of children. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, just want to mention that we are going to reprioritize the flow of the meeting tonight. And we're going to have Morgan with the big budget discussion go at the very end. That's to hopefully enable Lisa Hango to have time to join us for the budget discussion. We'll see how we're doing for time. So with that being said, I'm gonna move on to Gavin with our school spotlight.
Thank you. Were you gonna pull up the PowerPoint? Oh, there it is. If you could move it a little. No, I'm just teasing. She startled me today, so I'm trying to get even with her. So then, I wanted to talk a little bit today about how we are using our Tuesday and Mondays every week to improve instruction at Berkshire Elementary. Next slide, please. So let's start with the why. And so this was our key leverage point. We know that an important quality of education is a commitment to lifelong learning. It's not just a matter of allowing educators to increase capacity to meet the ever-changing needs of our students, which a lot of people who are unfamiliar with education kind of assume that it hasn't changed much since the time that they were in school as well, which, as we know, it's changed in my time, even as transitioning from a classroom teacher to a principal. In addition to that, what we try to do also is we need to model to students the importance of learning. That we as educators, the learning doesn't stop once you leave high school. The learning doesn't stop once you leave a classroom. You continue to learn all your lives, and we as educators need to make sure that we're modeling that as well. And so the school year designated 2 days each week to do exactly that, to help leverage and promote instructional capacity among our faculty and staff as well. And so those 2 days, of course, are on Mondays and Tuesdays. Monday from 3:15 to 4 p.m. and then Tuesday from 2:15 to 4 p.m. And so these are times that we are using at Berkshire to help teachers grow professionally through new skills. In addition to that, meet as teams to review data, identify gaps, and plan instruction, and then meet as teams to plan interventions, whether they be academic interventions or SEL interventions. Next slide. So what we knew at the time when we started planning out for the work that we have been doing this entire school year, is what we knew was that time was among the most valuable resources in education. I will still make this statement, and I know it's a bold one. I sometimes think time sometimes is more important than money even in terms of instruction. We knew that PDs and PLCs needed to be planned in advance to be valuable. I've fallen into this habit myself in my education career of planning this great meeting, or setting a meeting on the books, and then realizing 20 minutes before we meet, oh, what do I want to talk about? Oh, you know what? We'll just form the agenda as we go. So we wanted to make sure that we had time to plan it, to make sure that it was valuable and a valuable investment. We knew that pre-established systems and structures can remove that human error. And once again, that means just making sure that we have systems in place so that it's not always being invented each week by week as we go on. The sooner one can receive professional development, the faster it can make an impact in instruction, and that we needed to develop a schedule for the year to ensure that we are being deliberate in how we're leveraging this time. Next slide. And I do apologize, I know it's a little blurry, but what we ended up doing was developing a bi-weekly schedule for times that we are using for our professional development and professional learning communities. And so this is our week 1 schedule, which is we have specific times. One of the bigger ones is from 3:10 to 4. That was the time that we would devote for staff meetings. Next slide. And then week 2, that would switch so that we could have rotating EST meetings as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. However, there are certain commonalities. We wanted to make sure that there were PLCs each week. We wanted to make sure that there were times for intervention meetings each week. Oh, you can move on. So then, professional development. What that looked like was trainings, whole staff or department or grade specific, focus, learning new skills, learning new resources, reviewing key initiatives, data points, procedures. Those are the times where we come together as a team to review whether it be specific skills that we're going to implement or even specific ways that our school is operating. Examples of some of the PDs that we have had this past year. We've had specific PDs on EduClimber and the EST process. Once again, that's the educational support team for those students who might need those designated instructional plans to help them be successful in class. EduClimber being one of the tools that we use for housing our assessment data. In addition to that, we've had Starling Collaborative restorative practices, or Starling Collaborative meet with us to discuss restorative practices in the classroom. We've had All Learners Network focusing on math. We've even had things such as Invest EAP, which is human resources, which is basically a support system that's in place for our faculty and staff. Handle with Care, which is a way to help de-escalate conflicts. And also we had Dr. Irish join us as well to discuss ways to combat racism and intolerance in the classroom as well. Next slide. So the first example is I wanted to show you, this is a video I took 2 weeks ago it's 1 minute, it's of one of the professional developments that we had during our staff meetings. This one is restorative practices being led by Jessica Villeneuve at Starling Collaborative.
Acronym, and that is a work in progress, so the title may change, just so you know. We're going to learn the rules of the brain, how certain parts of our brain are really only accessible when other parts of our brain are accessible, and it actually follows a path, and that's Dr. Bruce Perry's brilliant work of helping even young kids understand how their brain works and how it works.
It might be the cord itself.
Also to think about how here at Berkshire School, in our classrooms and in our contacts with kids, we are triggering ourselves and students who have come from trauma all the time. So how we can look at those, think about those, and maybe make some subtle shifts. You'd be surprised how easy it is to make some adjustments to reduce triggers for students. Also think about some changes we can make in the school and to empower everyone to self-regulate and even co-regulate. We'll get to that even today. Also, anything that's restorative is going to prioritize wellness and relationship above all else. And so that is going to be a priority. And we're going to look at rituals, routines, and transitions that are going well and strengthen them and even add to them. And then, of course, use trauma-informed pedagogy, restorative language, and techniques to solve.
And then what proceeded on with that professional development was we began to look through some articles about trauma-informed, or basically the trauma-informed brain. And one of the biggest things we looked at was recognizing that students go through different cycles based on things that are happening in their environment, whether they be hyper-aroused, which is typically when you're going to see those students have those meltdowns, versus hypo-aroused, and that's something that can oftentimes go overlooked. That's when the students are more likely to internalize and basically detach from the environment. And we looked at different strategies for how to know those signs and things that we can do, interventions to help support them. With PLCs, this is a beautiful definition that I stole from Richard DeFore. It is, PLCs stand for professional learning communities, and these are basically ongoing processes where teachers or groups of educators come together and they basically go through recurring cycles of collective inquiry and action research to achieve better results for the students that they learn. Essentially, the idea is educators coming together, looking at the data, looking at where students are in progress to their goals, and then making instructional adjustments to help meet those students' needs. And the 4 questions that our PLCs at Berkshire focus on are, what do we want our students to know and be able to do? Fundamental, what is the goal? What is the outcome we're looking for? How will we know if they learn it? Well, they kind of looked at me and I think they understood it. No. What data are we collecting? Prove to me. What are these students doing to prove to us that they've met these goals? How do we respond when some students do not learn? And how do we extend learning for those who have already mastered it? Next slide. And so the way we've structured our PLCs, it includes K2. We have a K2 that focuses on some weeks on ELA and some weeks on math. We have a 3rd through 8th grade math and science team. We have a 3rd through 8th grade humanities team, including ELA and global citizenship. We have a unified arts team, and then our interventionists and our special educators have the option to float into different PLCs based on the needs of their specific students at that time. Some of the things I wanted to show you with that is I made sure to obscure any student names, but we typically have running agendas. We also do a lot of data tracking, and it can come in different ways where we're making sure we're looking at where students are in relation to those instructional goals. Next slide. And so I have a couple of quick snippets of different PLCs that have happened over the past few weeks at Berkshire. One of the things to pay attention to, I know these are sort of just brief check-ins, but look at just how the data is being discussed and how the planning is going and how they're going to use that data to inform their instruction.
That said, that it feels more like this is going to need a deeper dive than the rapid stuff that we are thinking about doing. Like she was comparing it to the 7th grade work that we're going to be doing, and that feels more like we can choose one thing and we can do it for this amount of time. We could try the strategy, we could come back, we could share information around it, and then see where we're going from there. This, if we're even talking about self-efficacy, we're going to have to build something, introduce it to the kids, get the kids to do what they need to do with it, and then, you know what I mean? Just to kind of.
I think yes and no. I think,
Okay.
Yeah, speak to this,
Yeah.
Well,
because I can't wrap my head around it.
self-efficacy is this really big overarching thing.
Right, right.
And I think that we need to get really specific about what we're going to address, like what part of self-efficacy. And I know we started talking about like just providing feedback, like that's one component of like this bigger thing.
Okay.
And if we really narrow in on like, if it's feedback we want to do, what are we doing for feedback right now? What one thing do we want to change to be able to make things better? What do we, then we can look.
I'm going to move to the next slide. I just wanted to let you know, they were talking about self-efficacy. That is one of the goals from our Portrait of a Learner. One of the things that we have found with PLCs is that when you have teachers who are teaching different groups of students, even if they're all math students, 3rd grade math students might have very different specific content-related goals as your 6th grade math students. So generally, when you have groups, it's called singletons. I didn't know that was a word until the beginning of this year. One of the things they have found is when you have teachers of different groups, like we do, one of the things you want to do is you want to look at those bigger universal skills. Self-efficacy is going to matter to 3rd graders, and it's going to matter to 8th graders, and it's going to matter to every student in between. It's also going to matter to students in science, and it's going to matter to students in math. And we have also a science teacher who's a part of that PLC as well. This next one is our humanities team. I might cut us off just a little bit because I am looking at the time, and I did want to leave just a little time for conclusion as well.
I would say
Or
next
like,
was
yeah,
it-
I
what else
choose
can we
them,
do?
but I
What
don't
other
really
areas
choose them. It's just
now?
whoever they're next to. So if they're next to each other anyway, then it might just be that they're independent during reading time, and then
It might just be
they go back and they still get that connection that they
trying to
need.
think if it's I'm missing academic data or
Maybe I separate them, but not like super far away. Maybe I separate them like rather than right next to each other. Maybe they're across from each other.
the kids in 5th and 8th. I think it's
So
more
they
academically they're not
Could be a
able
cool
to
way
do it,
too to bring
and
back
the
like
lower
some
one.
of the focuses of your mini
Sometimes in
lessons or your
6th and 7th. Well, not actually less than 7th.
Mhm.
7th, I think they can. They're not. So I don't know. So I'm trying to think
And
of the
then
next.
holding them accountable for that plan.
I'm going to go ahead and put it on pause there. In that case, we had 2 different groups. They were still working on the same standards, but they were strategizing based on grade level as well. You'll also notice we did have the presence of our special education teacher for middle school there, and our instructional coach and our ELA interventionist were both helping to facilitate the meeting as well. Next slide.
Do you want me to play this one?
No, we can move. The only thing I want to say here is this was an additional 3rd through 8th grade humanities meeting. We actually were fortunate to have Julie Benet, who's been helping to consult our PLC program. She was present as well to help narrow the focus of the PLC for 3rd through 8th grade humanities onto a specific universal skill. Next slide. So then, intervention meetings. That's the other part of this, and those are rotating as well. We have 2 different types of intervention meetings. We have academic meetings that focus either on ELA or math, and those are where our interventionists are present to help plan Tier 3 intervention and help plan out which groups are being pulled during win time and our MTSS process. This is the tier, and this is a very vital tier. These are the students who have struggled after receiving initial instruction and double dosing and reteaching. And so these are the students who are receiving that targeted intervention just to make sure that we're doing everything in our power before we move to the next step, which would be developing a specific learning plan for those students. We do the same thing also with SEL as well. Our SEL coordinator works with our students. And it's okay, you can move on to the conclusion actually. You can move on past this.
I actually didn't mean it, my finger.
No, it's
touched
okay.
it.
But our SEL coordinator, once again, works with those specific teachers to look at where students might be specifically struggling in terms of socio-emotional skills so that she can plan intervention groups, as well as providing that initial support of helping teachers to integrate second step SEL curriculum into their instruction. This final video, I'm going to just move through it, but this was an example of our 3rd through 4th grade team meeting with Jessica Villano from Starling Collaborative during that time to plan some specific whole class instruction during SEL time to make sure that we're promoting a restorative classroom environment. Next slide. This is my conclusion, and I know my time is up, but
You're fine.
okay, I didn't
Yeah,
want.
no, it's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't
Good.
feel rushed.
I want to end with just the goal is not to add. The goal is not to say, oh, we've got this extra time at the end of the day. Let's find some new things we can do. The goal rather is to reinforce what we're already doing and finding this specific time block and using it to reinforce the work that we're already doing in class and making sure that we do it with purpose. So I mentioned it's not wider. We're not adding things to teachers' plates, but rather we're giving time to dig deeper into our core values and our core goals at Berkshire. Data, 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 and more data. As you can tell, we love data. One of the things that we're looking at is we're bringing in the data. We want to see, does this data show that our students are meeting the learning goals? Then we want to say, how are we measuring that? How are we determining that? And then we're going into analyzing, did they do it? Did they meet the goals? Did they not meet the goals? What are we going to do for those students who were not able to meet the goals? What are we going to do for those students who did meet the goals? And how is that going to inform our instruction? And it really is cyclical. It's not doing something new every week. It's doing the same thing over and over and over again and moving forward with fidelity in the process.
With a different data set, right?
Yes. No, we wouldn't be looking at the same data. So it's very systematic. You collect the data, you see did they meet the goal, and then you move to the next set of data. Sometimes, and also those goals are going to evolve as well. They're not going to be the same goals every time. It's a matter of purposeful practice. This is a time for us to look at different strategies in order to make sure that we have time not just to review it. I wish I could just hand a book to teachers and be like, just read this book, you'll be fine. No, we actually have to have time to discuss it, we have to have time to make it our own, and we have to have time to internalize it. I will say, what we're doing is still a work in progress. It is a framework. We set up this schedule to make sure that we could follow it, and we could always know what's coming up next, so that we would always begin with the end in mind. The biggest thing we wanted to avoid was oh gosh, what am I going to do with the teachers this week? We know what we need to do, and so we wanted to make sure that we had that blocked into our calendars to do it regularly. However, with that said, there are still things that we're looking at to make it more efficient. There are times where the inevitable comes or happens that might throw us off of our schedule. There might be times where we thought we were off on the right path, but then we realized, you know what, we really fell short of this goal. We can't move forward with our next step until we go back and review and revise. And so there are times where we've found that there are shortcomings, and so we're going to continue to work on that as well. We're going to collect the data, analyze, and make adjustments as we go forward. I was going to open up this time for questions. Like I said, I do know that I am past my time. However, I am happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Well, less of a question, but just more of a comment. I mean, it's really excellent, purposeful work. I appreciate that overview. And I hope, are you finding that the teachers and staff are, appreciating the time to be able to engage in the work with their peers and that it's kind of helping them with the work that, I know the really at times challenging, but good work that they're doing in the classrooms?
I think it is, and one of the bigger things that I'm seeing that's a positive trend is the teachers are beginning to turn to each other more as resources as well. There's a lot less isolation. It's a very common trap to fall into I don't know what I want to do with the teachers. I'm just going to give you this time to work in your classrooms. And don't get me wrong, teachers sometimes do enjoy working in their classrooms, but at some point, they already have that time, and what they need isn't more time by themselves. They need time to meet with colleagues in order to share best strategies And also, sometimes it's just reassuring to say, you know what, we're all on the same page. This is where I struggled. Oh, well, here's how I got through that point. I tried these strategies. But I love what you're doing, so I'm going to start borrowing some of the strategies you're using as well.
Great, it's excellent. Thanks, Gavin. All right. So then that will bring us now to you, Lynn, with your board report.
Okay. So I'm gonna start with personnel, and I know it's a little bit far away for us, so I'm going to look at my own computer so I can see. So you have, we've hired several teachers. I would ask that the board make a motion to approve Abigail McLaughlin Dubois, grade 2 in Berkshire, and Samantha Lucier for school nurse in Berkshire. Informationals, Jennifer Desatel has taken a paraeducator position here, and I would ask the board to approve Whitney Wright, grade 5 teacher at Sheldon.
Great, I'll make that motion to approve those hires. We'll do that by roll. Erin,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda, Mary is an aye.
We've just passed the December 1 notification deadline for retirements, and we have no retirement notifications for the NMV district. We have several open positions still remaining in our schools, and I think I'll say them just in case anybody's watching and interested. We have paraeducator positions in all 4 of the schools. We're looking still for two unfilled positions at Berkshire, an literacy interventionist position, an enrichment teacher, and in Sheldon, a technology support specialist, kind of an IT person that's not licensed, people with good experience with some of the IT system work and good with devices would be an ideal candidate for that. And we're looking for a behavior technician in Sheldon, PT paraeducator. It was likely put on by our director.
Yeah.
In NMV, we still have that unpaid help position too. That's just still out there without candidates. So also on January 1st, employees are asked to tell us whether or not they have earned enough credits to make a column movement. So I won't read those all to you, but you can see that there are several who are making 1 or 2 jumps. Some of them are doing double jumps this year, so that's exciting to see. We have a lot of people that are in. I think part of this is a symptom of our staffing shortage is resulting in us hiring people that haven't gone through a traditional teacher training route, and so they're in licensure programs right now where they're really actively pursuing, and some of them are making a 30 credit jump in this year, so it's exciting to see. So Courtney always does a good job of putting some examples of fun things that kids have done in the last month for each of our schools. So there's some photos there. I have nothing under students. In terms of our last meeting, you asked me to discuss the electives and do an elective audit. This came as a result of our conversation about adding, help me? Either STEM or a Spanish teacher at Sheldon. And one of the data that we went over last month was really centered on the number of students at Sheldon and the number of electives that we need at Sheldon in order to meet the needs of all the students, but also meet the obligations in the master agreement in terms of preparatory time for all of the teachers, because there are significantly more teachers in Sheldon. And this brought us to a conversation about equity and about, do we want to add an elective teacher there that others don't have the same opportunity for. So you asked me to take a look at all of the electives, which I did. I want to just begin by saying thank you to Courtney, because this was data that I thought I was going to pull together myself, and then once I received all the data and realized that when I asked for master schedules, I was thinking I was going to get 4 pieces of paper, and it was a binder like this. So I gave it to Courtney, and she's probably spent 6 or 7 days working on this data. So it was a much bigger deal than we thought. So I just want to say, before we get into sharing what that data looks like, there may be some inaccuracies. I'm going to give the principals an opportunity to dig in there and take a look to make sure. I don't think the inaccuracies that will be in there are like so big that our data is going to give us a false impression, but we might be off by a few minutes here or there, because no offense to any of you, it's a little challenging to unpack what your schedules mean by how they're written. So Courtney did her best. I'm so impressed with how that turned out. So I thought I was going to build all these charts from that, and Morgan waved some sort of magic wand and came out with a data, I don't even know how to describe it. It's called Looker Studio. And he was able to just pull all the data that we have in that spreadsheet, and he was able to create these visuals that represent this. So I'm going to,
Do you want to drive?
I think I want to drive.
Okay. Let me share this instead.
Okay. So that's what it looks like when all the data's in. That's a little overwhelming, right? So when you look at this, these are your 4 schools. Oh, your mouse goes the wrong way.
Is there any way you can share this via email so it's just a little easier to see?
Yes.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay,
That
you'll
would
do
be
that.
awesome if I could look at my screen instead
Yeah.
of the far off.
I'm going to take you, you won't have to look at it at that level though, Mary. You're going to be able to see it much
Okay.
clearer with where we're going to go.
Okay.
So what this does is it represents each day in each of our schools, and each color represents something different. So you have like time for your advisory or your homeroom, your home base, our dismissal, circle time, ELA, foundation, so on and so forth. So we gather data about all of those pieces. Now this is overwhelming and it's hard to understand. So Morgan has this set up so that we can look at it through the lens of all grade levels and all content areas. Or I could say, let's look at only art. Let's just take that by way of example. So when we do the data that way, and we look at, this is reflective of how many minutes of art are taught in each school each week. This doesn't really tell you, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't really tell you how much each student gets, but if we narrow the focus so that we say, okay, now let's only choose kindergarten. So we can take art, only kindergarten, and that shows you how much art students get each week in kindergarten. So you've got 60 minutes in Bakersfield, 20 in Berkshire, 45 in Montgomery, 40 in Sheldon. So there's some variation. We can do that, and we can look across grade levels. So I as I was going through this, I thought, okay, let's do K, 4, and 7 to just get a representation of what that might look like. So this is art for 4th grade. And again, it's 60, 40, 45, 45 closer, but still some variation. And then I looked at art for only 7th grade by way of example. See a big difference once you get into the middle school. So you go from 80 in Bakersfield to 22 and a half potentially.
I think some of that might be affected because our UA blocks are universally 40 minutes, but that might be affected by the fact that we do have quarterly rotating schedules as well.
It is. That would make sense.
Yes. So the way that Berkshire was for like they would have art 1 quarter, which was, so then I had to divide it so it equaled out to the minute. So it's a little skewed, but.
So I'm just gonna run through. Do we want to pick one grade level and I'll run through, or do you want me to do this for each of the electives and then take a look at how they compare?
I just have a question. What does GC stand for?
Global citizenship.
Well, thank you.
That was too
And-
long.
And I didn't see PE, so is that
It's in
wrapped
there.
in the health?
No,
It's
PE
not.
is its own.
So let's switch. We'll go from art to, let's say,
Same math.
health. We know what this is going to look like because we only have one school with a health teacher right now. So this is reflective of 7th grade health. This is not to say that no health is being taught in the other schools. It's being woven into some of the science curriculum, but Bakersfield has the benefit of having someone separate doing that. So let's stick with 7th grade for a little bit. Let's take a look at library only. You can see that it shifts a little bit. Students are getting more time in Berkshire for library, but there's a variety of times for each of those elective classes. Now let's go to music. Let's do music only. Similar difference.
And so just to clarify for Berkshire, it's not totally accurate in this version because they have the quarterly. Why exactly, explain to me why that would account for the discrepancy of hours relative to the other schools.
I think what might be happening is because there are times where students may not have a specific UA during that quarter, and that was largely developed. That was something that had been developed before I arrived, but I think it had been done largely to account for the fact that there are certain teachers that we only have on campus for certain days. And so our teacher is currently only working 2 days a week, Thursdays and Fridays. So that was sort of necessitated so that we would end up with every student would be able to get art, but it wasn't feasible to have it consistently every quarter.
Okay, understood.
I have a question. So if you
Is
were looking
Berkshire
at
the only,
if you looked at the full
Hold on
year,
1 second, Kat. Go ahead, Holly.
if you looked at the full year, they're still only getting that half the year, rather than some schools might be having art twice a week all year long. So it still amounts to half of what, okay.
Kat, go ahead.
is Berkshire the only school in NMV that's on quarters and everyone else is on a trimester?
No, they're all on trimesters, but your rotation
Yeah.
is
It's
quarterly.
quarterly.
They're using the term quarterly, but it doesn't line up with a reporting period.
This time it does actually, but we based it off of the quarters on the
Like a calendar quarter, right?
exactly
Yeah.
yes.
And I wasn't following what Arlene just said.
So I think what she's saying essentially is that what this reflects is that Berkshire's getting about half of it, about half of the year. So Bakersfield 7th grader is getting music 2 times a week for 80 minutes a week total. Berkshire's students are getting it for
I would say
35 minutes.
I would say about 40 minutes.
But they're only getting it 2 quarters a year or 1 quarter a year.
I would say it depends. Different classes. I'd have to go back and dig through it
Okay.
to see how it lines up. It was meant to try to make it as equitable as possible.
I have one other question too. When you're listing music, is that including lessons for instruments and just
No.
classroom music?
Yes.
classroom music.
Yes. So then if we go to PE, we see the most significant discrepancy with PE because this was a carryover from when Bakersfield was a single district, and that was something that was a priority within the community to be able to offer PE to all kids every day. And so I think that it's not every day.
It's not every day, but they're still getting more.
So they're getting the equivalent of 2 hours of PE a week, and in Berkshire they're getting just under an hour. Montgomery's getting 45 minutes a week. Sheldon's getting 45 minutes a week.
Explain something about Berkshire. So I just want to go back to Berkshire for a minute. I'm looking at my raw data, and it's a little bit odd because it looks like in my raw data, K through 4 is getting the 40 minutes, so once a week, right? But then when you go to 5, 6, 7, 8, that's when it's rotating. So that's why it looks different. But they are getting 40 minutes when they have art and music.
I think it happens the opposite for PE, because when you look at that, our K through 4 aren't getting, I mean, they're getting an hour.
Yes, they're getting
Yeah.
an hour.
So your middle schoolers, yeah. Yeah.
So we'll do 4th grade. We'll take a look at the 4th grade. They get 90 minutes a week in both Bakersfield and Sheldon.
Nope, yeah.
And then, what,
That's wrong. That's wrrong. They get 45 minutes. It's,
a week?
yeah, they have,
It's probably 2 4th grade classes.
yes,
That's
it
what
got
it is.
combined
Okay.
somehow accidentally. So.
Okay. So Berkshire is 40 and Montgomery and Sheldon are about 45.
And Bakersfield is at 90,
scheduled
is it?
sent you and had that
They don't
little
get 3
arrow with
Ps
the
a week.
double. Yes,
I think they get 2.
it's not true.
Have to look
Tweaked
at
it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So the point is, when we're having this conversation about equity, we've got a ways to go because we're not equitable now. So I think what we have been, the principals are definitely going to have time to look at this and navigate this for themselves. But as we're making decisions around adding or not adding electives into the budget, I think that we need to be more data driven. This has definitely opened my eyes to the discrepancy. I knew there was a discrepancy. I did not know the magnitude of the discrepancy. So this is something that when we think about like everything, there's a cost to every decision we make. So when we look at discrepancies, I think when we look at let's take 4th grade for example, and let's shift to ELA. And let's choose ELA and our word foundations and word study. So when we look at that data, we see that we've got 665 minutes of the ELA block in Montgomery, 570 in Berkshire, 485 in Sheldon, and 395 in Bakersfield. So when you think about the difference in instructional time in the core content areas, there is a cost associated with having more elective classes. You will ultimately get less core content time. So there's some work that we need to do around how this is broken out too, because I believe I want to know why foundations, by way of example, is separate in Bakersfield, but it may be embedded in the other communities, and maybe these are closer than what we thought. But we got a little work to do there to figure it out. And then I'll just shift us. The last place I'll go is math. So just looking at math instructional time and what that looks like, and there's some work we need to do there in terms of like how many minutes are being spent each week on math. And if we shift that grade level to middle school, we've got some variation there as well. So this is the data. I've only given you the one grade level to take a look at. Are there other questions you have, things that you want to see me put up there?
Is that direct instruction time? Is that what we're looking at as far as?
It's the whole entirety of the math block.
Okay. So like in Bakersfield, some kids don't have math on Friday because that's not what they missed on Tuesdays.
For 7th or 8th grade, yes.
Mine is at 5, 6 too.
No,
No?
it's not true for 5, 6.
Okay.
They're
Getting all of their math, their language arts.
So we're having conversations about that piece.
Yep.
And the number of minutes.
And can you do science?
Sure.
And
Do
I
you
did
want that? Go ahead.
I did send this out to everyone so we can look at it and play with it, and in theory, the data as we, share this with principals and clean up some of those errors, the data should automatically update.
And this is middle school
This
science.
is 7th grade science,
Yeah.
by way of example.
And we can extrapolate that with 7th grade, that is likely relevant for middle school in general. 6, 7, and 8.
Right, that's why I chose K.
And 4 is representative of
probably 3,
that.
4, 5.
Yeah, okay.
Most of the schedules
have to sort of align just to make sure that other things work as well.
Yeah.
And so is it fair to say when we are looking, especially at Bakersfield with some of these core content subject areas like math, science, and ELA, that they are losing instructional opportunities and time to electives like PE and art? Because I mean, the time, there's only a finite amount of hours in a day and in a week.
So yes, and I'm bringing you back to the first visual, so you can see that they have varying lengths to their school day as well.
Right.
So you've got Berkshire with the longest school day, Sheldon with the shortest, and then it looks like Montgomery and Bakersfield are relatively close, but you definitely can see that there are differences in terms of where the electives are stretched out and where the core content areas are stretched out. So
Okay, and that, in particular, that PE piece at Bakersfield feels somewhat like, I mean, way disproportionate relative to the others, and hasn't kind of really hasn't shifted for years, so that you've just maintained this kind of strong daily
No.
PE
It's not
requirement.
daily.
No,
They have shifted, because they don't have PE every
No.
day. But they have 2 electives every day, that is true.
Okay.
And it's been that way for a while.
Okay,
I think
I
that's
think
the
that-
fundamental
I think the PE
difference.
is skewed because, yeah.
Yeah.
They're no longer, I mean, they've been on a 5-day since 4 years ago.
so they have,
PE
Bakersfield
twice
has
a-
2 electives a day
Mhm.
versus, and how many of the other schools? One.
And no,
Okay.
and we have 4 specials, because guidance isn't technically a special because the teacher stays in there. So
Right.
they don't have them every day necessarily. They'll have music one day, they'll have art another day, PE another day, and what am I forgetting?
Montgomery.
Music, did I say that already?
Library, yeah,
So,
okay,
and they're 45 minutes each,
Yeah.
so that adds up to like kind of what the teacher's prep is.
right, of course.
So this is also a symptom of us living in that we've been forced for decades to think about our resources through a scarcity lens. And so you'll see in Berkshire, the art teacher is here literally only 2 days a week. And Gavin has one of most grade levels, but do you have any that are split right now?
I have one second grade class that has 2 sections.
Okay, so there have been times where you've had 2 to 3 grade levels split at once. And that was one art teacher 1 day a week for a long time, and that going to 2 was an increase. So this is a clear indication that we have not done the work around looking into these resources, and how they're being deployed across the district. And I think that's work that we need to do. And I think that I'm not saying that it isn't important to have lots of PE and lots of art and lots of music. I'm not trying to diminish that in any way. I think we need to make choices. For every choice that you make, you have to think about what you give up in that. So I think there has to be future work that we're going to do. It's probably not going to be done in time for this budget cycle completely, but I think that we need to have some conversations about what are our priorities and what does our outcome data look like, and are there levers that we can push on to be able to increase in one spot and maybe have to decrease in another spot. And as we're looking at decreasing in a spot in one place, that might be an opportunity for someone who has less to increase in another place.
And do you feel that there's any indication from the data perspective in the core content areas for, say, the students at Bakersfield, especially in the math and the ELA, that data and test scores are showing that they are potentially needing more instructional time in those core contents and potentially less elective time? And again, I want to be really mindful, like I'm a huge proponent of the arts and physical education, and I mean, all of it is important for kind of educating the whole student, mind and body, spirit. I'm fully cognizant of that, but like we said, there are only so many hours in a day and a week, and if the data is starting to show that we have students that can benefit from a little less elective time and more core content time, then that might need to get right-sized.
I think one thing we have to be careful of is that this is a relationship, not causational. That you can't say that because they have more electives, it has caused this to happen. That it may be a relationship there, and that maybe it's how we use the rest of our day has a big impact on how we're doing on things. I think there has been research that shows upping some of our elective time does not diminish academics.
In fact, helps it.
Yes. So I think we have to be careful that it doesn't have to be equal.
I think we can do some work to look at the data. I hear what you're saying, that it might, sometimes you don't know which driver is impacting the outcome.
Right.
But what I also know is that there are really clear recommendations about minimum number of minutes in terms of instruction for math and ELA.
Exactly.
And I think that we're gonna have to take a hard look at that, because I don't think we're meeting that everywhere.
Yeah, I agree.
So I
know that there are also minimum recommendations on physical education, and many of our schools are not meeting that. I would say probably all of them, including Bakersfield.
Not in EQS. They're all
not in EQS, but on.
So you're talking about national standards.
Actually, national recommendations.
Correct.
Yes.
What we base decisions on have been the Vermont Educational Quality Standards, that the equivalent of 2 times per week is what they're looking for.
Yes.
In the EQS, without that being defined in terms of number of minutes.
Yes.
Kat?
Yeah, that was kind of my question when I saw some of the big discrepancies on the core subjects is like the minimum requirements. And I mean, I get that we're looking at this now, and it's great that we're looking at it, but it's a little concerning that we're only looking at it because of the ask, I guess, from Sheldon into the budget for additional electives. And I guess I just wondered, like, who does monitor, like, minimum requirements? And the whole equity piece of it, I guess, just keeps sticking out to me. And I get that every school, you know, we want to remain, you know, each school kind of having its own uniqueness, but it just kind of, you know, just again with the equity, just thinking that things should be a little bit more the same across the board. And I always just think back to like our students that move in between the different schools, and then you go to one school and you've got, you know, just these big discrepancies. But like the equity, like I just keep thinking of the directors at the SU level, like, do they, like Michelle, does equity in this realm fall under what she does?
I would say this is probably in my realm, in my work with the principals, and this hasn't been work that we've done this year. We've done it in years past to look at the master schedules to determine the number of instructional minutes. We have agreements about a number of instructional minutes, and when I look at the raw data, I can see kind of what is happening. That I also have a principal brain, because I remember what it was like to build a master schedule and have a 0.2 art teacher, and know like I can only fit it in here, and it's going to have to interrupt that math block on this one day because it's the only place it will fit within the puzzle. So I think this is also a symptom of when we have all of those pieces, sometimes where we want them to happen doesn't necessarily work. So when I'm looking at raw data, I can see in this year's group that, you know, we have some of the days that look like in most of our schools that are at that 90, but then we have other days that have gotten cut short and they're down in like 55 or 70. And so this is definitely going to drive a conversation at our administrative team level, because this is something that I probably should have seen, but when I'm looking at just a hard copy of a master schedule, it does not stand out the way it has stood out looking at the data this way.
And then like just the smaller things, and I don't know again if this is just impossible because of everything you just said, but like also I was surprised to hear you say that even at this point, like we have different, like the schools have different lengths, like the school day. And then it looked like some of them, I mean, I couldn't tell for sure, but have like different amounts of time for lunch. Like I would just think those would be really basic things that are the same across the board, like school day length, lunch recess. But again, like what you're saying makes sense. Like maybe it's just not that simple because there's just so many moving parts. And then my second and last thing is, I just wonder too, as we try to build just more equity across all the schools, will this maybe put us in a better position to hire? Like if we're always running into like a 0.2 of this special and 0.4 of that, but now can hire more full-time spreading across a couple of schools, which I know that we have done with a lot of things over the, since the merger, but, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Erin, there's a lot of ways that this data is going to inform future conversations around the work, and I just lost the point I was going to make. What was the first point that you made? Oh, length of day. There are a lot of factors behind the scenes that aren't really visible. Like they can't all have the exact same length of day because all of the bus routes are tied to one another. So in order for the buses to operate, they need to leave Bakersfield at a certain time, which needs to be different from Enosburg, which needs to be different from Richford, because those connector buses need to happen in all of those outside communities, and it's not super complicated. In terms of the lunch and recess, that's another conversation I'll have with the leaders. I suspect some of those things are tied with some of our schools have what I used to call a cafegimatorium, where they, we have the benefit in Berkshire, really that's the only school now that has a separate gym. So they're not as confined by when they can schedule their PE classes, but the schools that have the space that it serves all the functions, they have to be able to start a PE class by 1 o'clock to be able to get through, and that might impact how many minutes that you can offer for lunch, because you've got 3 lunches and you need that last class to end. They have to go till 11:30. So those kinds of decisions are really complicated. So it might seem that we could get to exactly the same. I don't think we can get to the exact same, but I think we can get much closer than we are now when it comes to more equitable opportunities. And these are things that I think we need you to keep pushing back on us about too, because this is part of the work. But what I want to bring us back to, there was a sense that it would be unfair for us to add something in Sheldon. But when we look at this data, we have a lot of things that are benefiting a lot of schools in different ways that we don't have in some of the other schools. They need another elective mathematically because of the number of students. In my mind, it doesn't make sense to say it can't be STEM and it can't be Spanish because we don't have other kids that are getting those opportunities. That makes more sense to me than saying let's pick an elective and be duplicative about it because we need another person. That doesn't make sense to me if they already have that kind of opportunity. So I'm asking you to consider building that position into the budget, which Morgan is going to talk about, and then we'll figure out what that position's going to be, because some of that's going to be related to the market and who we get and how we advertise what the position is. And then as you're asked, there's another part where, when I look at this data, I'm not going to be able to recommend that it makes sense to make your music teacher full-time when you look at the data in terms of the inequitable amount of instructional time that already exists in Bakersfield. But this is data, the way that this is in here now and the way that this is built, we're going to be able to use this in years to come to make some of these hard conversations, hard decisions.
One more thing. When we joined together as 4 schools, it was brought to taxpayers anyway, to my belief, was that we weren't going to say that schools had to be the same.
Right.
That adding, if they feel that that's what they want as a Spanish teacher, then, and just because somebody else doesn't feel the same need in your community, shouldn't stop them from being able to go in there.
That is not how the conversation went last month, Arlene.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
No, because and I understand why, because we're also trying to create more equitable opportunities for our students. So if we have the ability to get a Spanish teacher, I mean, maybe the conversation is looking at, as people, I'm not recommending that you globally say, we're gonna cut 4.5 elective teachers. I'm not saying that at all, but as people leave these positions, we probably need to have some conversations about what's the FTE that we replace that with, and what's the assignment. Is it the same as it was, or should we look at making this more equitable by saying 4 days a week here, but this school needs 1 extra day of that? Like, those are the conversations we need to have going forward.
Yeah, I guess, I missed last month's meeting, but I do remember at that time, because that was a question in Bakersfield, because we did have PE every single day, and people said, are we gonna lose that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was said, no, if that's what your community feels is important, they'll be able to be above what other schools are, if that's important to them in their school. And to me, it feels the same way for Sheldon, that they feel Spanish teacher would really benefit their kids. And, I'm not saying that Bakersfield would say no, but I'm saying that seems to be one of those things that communities should have more input on.
I think you have to think about how we define communities now, though.
Yeah, well,
because
I guess
community used to be defined by town, and when you're sitting in this chair at this table, community is really all 4 of these towns.
Yeah, and I guess what hurts or what bothers me is when the schools were put together in this way, we were told that was not going to be the case.
Well, I think what you were told, to be fair, was that that's not the intention, is that we would go in and try to take things away from schools.
Right.
But at the same time, I can't in good faith say to you that we shouldn't be examining the amount of instructional time that's happening
And I agree.
in core classes.
I agree
and in order
completely.
to do that, you're going to have to lose something eventually.
Something, and there are other places to look, is all I'm saying, is, that we look carefully at before we take anything away from anybody. Say, are there places that we're maybe using more time that we don't need to use there and can be put in?
Yeah.
The whole picture.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I just do thank you all for doing the work. I know it was a heavy lift. I think it is a good starting point and a jump off for work that we're going to have to do in the future. And for me, just listening to everybody's conversation, it makes me fully understand and really realize that yes, we are a community, yes, we are one district, but each of our schools have so many unique attributes that the kids need different things, the sizes are different, the locality is different, that we have differences. And I think that's okay. But I think as long as we can get to the heart of what is needed in each community in a unified way, in my mind, that's really the goal, that as a board and a district, we're attuning to the needs of each school as a unified team. And I'm really thankful that you guys started this work, because it was really, really good to look at.
And I do think around the STEM for, addition at Sheldon, I mean, I feel like it's a yes and as opposed to a yes but here. Mm-hmm. And meaning that yes, like it's fine. I think it's fine to move forward. Obviously the numbers show that Sheldon needs, based on numbers alone, another elective with another teacher in that building. And the conversation then kind of triggered for people that, wow, we would love to see more STEM for the other communities as well. Mm-hmm. And so moving forward, I think we can have that conversation about what could that look like? What would that look like? It gets tricky when you need to find 4 STEM teachers for 4 separate, disparate, somewhat far away from one another schools. I don't think it's impossible, and obviously that is a heavy lift from a budget perspective. But could we potentially down the line find one person for Sheldon and one person that splits time between the 3 schools, adding another interesting kind of more cutting edge 21st century learning opportunity for those students as well. But not to the exclusion, just because we don't have it in the moment at the other 3 schools, I don't feel as though it would warrant not moving forward with it for Sheldon.
I think you bring up a really good point, and I think this is one of the struggles with small schools is that I wouldn't want to hire a full-time STEM teacher in Berkshire or Bakersfield because they can't give up that amount of instructional time to be able to keep a full-time person in front of kids all the time. So I think the logical thing to do would be to say, well, let's do 2 days in Berkshire as the biggest school and, day and a half in each of the other 2 schools. But the reality is, if I'm a brand new teacher, or I'm any kind of teacher, and I'm looking for work, that is much less appealing than to be full-time in one location. So this is one of those things as a school district that operates a lot of schools, when we try to piecemeal those pieces out, it gets exponentially harder to hire and to fill those positions.
Can I just say a little bit to what you said around the music piece? And I do, I hear you when we look at that data, and I'm very aware of it, that adding, another day to making my music teacher full-time, because that's what it amounts to. She's 4 days. Doesn't seem equitable right now, but I do want to just put out there that she has built an incredible program in Bakersfield, and I realize not everybody else has that. And part of the ask around why we went that route is because she has very little planning time currently in her schedule. And part of the reason for that is because what you don't see up there is she's doing lessons almost all throughout the day. So she not only is doing her music classes, but she's doing guitar, she's doing chorus, she's doing band, and those extra pieces that are built throughout her day leave her with almost no planning time. So that was the reason for that ask. So I'm just putting that out there and not saying I understand why you're saying that doesn't make sense, but that is kind of the reasoning behind that ask, because she's building more than just a 4-day.
And I just want to throw out there, we've had 3 music teachers, well 4 in the time that I was there, and 3 of them left because it wasn't full-time and they could go somewhere else and so again, it's, teacher retention too. We lost 2 excellent, one went to Essex, one went to Stowe, so.
And one's and the one after that one, so
That's right, yeah, so, it just, it hurts our teacher retention in that our salaries are less than those places in the first place, and then when you cut a full day off, that hurts their retirement, it hurts their.
Well, we didn't, in this case, I just want to clarify, she did not want full-time.
She didn't
originally.
Until this year, so.
Right.
I know. Yeah. Erin?
Part of the conversation last month and read the STEM position or the extra position to Berkshire. I support, or not Berkshire, I'm sorry, Sheldon. And I support your data shows that you need it, those students need it, it needs to be in there for contract purposes, for planning. I think the biggest area that was like that kind of made me stop for a minute was the equity. Not having it equal, because that's not equity. I wasn't looking for it to be the same across the schools, but I pushed with it, like looking at to provide access to some of those same skills that the students will get with a STEM teacher in those other schools. And it looks like you've already seen that work. If we have extra art time in some areas or extra library time in some areas, those are perfect opportunities to involve some of those skills that can happen. And I think that once again, I'm going to state that it fairly have to be a brand new hire. It could be somebody who has the same access to training that a STEM teacher is going to get, or the same access to the materials that they will have. So I just want to continue to push that if it goes that route, that all of our schools have the opportunity to possibly have access to some of those things. But I'm 100% on board with adding we call it an enrichment or an extra enrichment person in Sheldon.
It's a little bit hard to hear.
Thanks, Erin.
I would agree with that too, though, that she's saying some of us have some extra. Our art teacher is doing some of that stuff most some of that time. So I think there are places where it's happening as well.
Right. and may potentially, we might also be able to look at creative ways, field trips, other learning opportunities, bringing in people from the outside for certain special events and activities and things that are STEM focused, you know, as a way to, like Erin is saying, at least try to kind of start introducing some of that important content, while we then, you know, continue to look at budgets and staff and stuff that, and, you know, might be able to bring that more permanently into the other schools.
I did not show this one. I don't know if you want to show that data before we move on.
Sure.
But so Courtney, can you select all of the electives and just pick all grade levels? So I did art, guidance, health, library,
All the electives.
yeah, music and PE, and then select all grade levels.
Share now. Sorry, I have to get into sharing.
Sorry, I meant to start with this one. So I think one thing that's happening with this is guidance is showing up in Bakersfield. Well, your colors are different than what I'm looking at on my screen. Guidance is showing up in Bakersfield, but it's not showing up in Berkshire, Montgomery, and Sheldon.
Yep.
And I think that might have been an SEL thing.
I didn't finish that.
Okay. So if you take guidance out of this equation, it's that first box on the left is that green box that you see. Just remove that piece. There you go. Because what we had on the other, when we looked at the data, we had both guidance and SEL merged, and I asked Courtney to take it apart, but we didn't have time for that. So minus guidance, that's what your distribution of elective resources looks like.
And I guess I would throw in there that if we had been able to find a health teacher, that those other three schools would also have been able to have health in there.
It's not, it's the only.
Yes.
And from my data, the only school that was offering yearbook, for example, was Montgomery.
Yep.
I don't know about the other three, but that was its own.
I mean, we have it, but it's more of a club, it's not. It's not a class.
And the health that you currently have at Bakersfield is the same person who does PE is doing your health? Because we still haven't been able to fill the district-wide health position.
Right. So he's a full-time teacher, but part of his time is health.
Gotcha.
And
So does that imply then that if we can ever find a district health person that we've budgeted for, correct?
Yeah, it's in the budget.
That person would be split between all schools but Bakersfield
Correct.
because yours is taken care of by your PE teacher.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
So in my PE, did you include the teacher PE that was on Fridays? So that's actually our second PE of the week is led by the teachers. So it's not a PE teacher, it's our teachers on Friday afternoons. They all have a scheduled time in the day. So that's added in.
And that is added in the data.
So that green is part of our teachers teaching PE. That's not
Not
all
the
a
PE
PE
teacher.
teacher.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Because all of my blocks should be
Everything's
exactly the
45.
same.
Yeah, mine too.
It's driven by your schedule, not.
Yeah, but it's a teacher
45.
PE.
Yeah, okay.
On Fridays.
Listen, I
I
tried.
just wondered, I just didn't know why my block, that green one was bigger than the rest. Because they're all 45 minutes.
Me of the same.
You're welcome.
Kat, did you have something? I thought I heard you for a minute there.
No, I'm good.
Okay, someone I thought,
I have a
in,
question.
oh, was that you, Erin? Sorry. Yeah, go for it.
Yes, I do. I'm just wondering, I noticed that the Berkshire has an enrichment teacher posted. Is that a position? I mean, it's looking like we should be looking at maybe adding some time there with a school that's in size similar to Sheldon, and that they have quite the discrepancy.
I can speak a little bit to that position. That's actually a position that was originally conceived because a lot of times our UA teachers, if they don't have specific UA block instruction, they are going into classrooms to support during enrichment time as well. And that's time when other students might be pulled out for that targeted intervention that we discussed, or that I discussed earlier in the earlier tonight. One of the things that we found though was that because we hadn't been able to fill that role, I think the initial vision was that person would be helping to plan enrichment activities. But because we didn't have that position filled, we were able to come together as a leadership team and then work through our PLC process to start developing enrichment menus that then the UA teachers can consult with the core instruction teachers in order to implement. To be quite honest, at this time, I don't necessarily think that position, at least as it was envisioned, is no longer required at Berkshire, just because we have been able to fill what those core responsibilities were going to be in other ways, largely through revitalizing our PLC process to plan those enrichment menus and activities.
Was that grant funded?
No.
So we built that into last year's budget.
Yes, and I think that happened whenever the 5th grade was moved into the middle school rotation. That opened up an instructional position.
That's what it was. So that's why. We went down one classroom teacher at the end of last year, and then that allowed that opportunity to look at that position differently.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right.
I think I have one other, if there are no other questions on that, 2 other things.
Yeah.
The next is, you don't need to go to the slideshow, Courtney, it's fine. Just a PCB update. I'm wondering if Gavin and or Morgan has any update related to the Berkshire PCB.
I don't think there's anything since the last meeting. We're waiting on test results.
And those happened what, late September, I believe?
Yeah. Everything moves incredibly slowly in the PCB realm. So
it's glacial.
It really is. It really is.
I know, I think we'd already mentioned this, but I know one of our hopes is that because we unclustered those 2 classrooms and tested them separately, our hope is that the current math classroom, just because both of those rooms are very, very different in their materials, and it was the ELA classroom that had been tested, but those had been clustered together. I think, at least at this point, the hope is that when those results come back, that might actually find that math classroom has levels well below what the state is
that would be great.
mandating.
So that's what happens in this PCB. They don't test every room. They do an assessment and they put like rooms together. So if you have a positive in one of those rooms, they count it as a positive in all the like rooms. So that's why we lost 2. We had a positive test in 1, but lost 2. So we'll keep PCB updates on every agenda from here forward. And I have one last thing that came to me just in the last couple of days. So Mark and Amanda St. Pierre are longtime residents here in Berkshire. They have been wonderful supporters of the Berkshire School for decades. All 3 of their children, Jamie, Megan, and Bradley, all graduated from Berkshire. They are purchasing property across the street. I believe it's the big farm property. And what they would like to do is donate a 2-acre parcel of land that is directly kind of across from our entrance here to the school. And their thinking was that could potentially in the future become overflow parking for the school, for school events. So if you've lived here or visited here when there's a concert or a big game, there are cars parked on 118 and there are cars parked on Water Tower. But it's incredibly dangerous and dark. And so it is an opportunity. It's a very generous opportunity from the St. Pierre's. The only ask is that they ask that the school district pays for the closing costs on the land, but they would like to transfer it over to the district. I have checked with our attorney, and the attorney saw no issues with. I didn't know if I would need to have you bring them for the voters, and there was no concern about that. And the attorney might be able to even assist with the land purchase closure to save a little bit of money. They've offered to do that. So is there any objection to receiving this gift from the St. Pierre's?
Is it across 118, Lynn?
Yes.
What's the acreage size of the school now? School property?
Almost 50 acres. That would add 2 more.
When you say closing costs, is that just attorney fees or is that any like realtor commissions?
It would be under $2,000. It's just the attorney's fees, from what I understand.
Okay.
Is that what the school envisions that use for?
I think we'd have to,
Development of it.
yeah, we'd have to think about that, like whether or not there could be other opportunities there, but that's certainly what their family was thinking, is that it might be they're not gonna put any conditions on it, but they thought it might be good overflow parking.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly generous.
Yes, it is.
And certainly that's a nominal fee relative to the value that it would add to the school, especially that if it does go to the parking, it's nice that there aren't restrictions so that it could be developed as seems appropriate. Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Do we need to make a motion on it?
I just have a question, if anybody's checked with like the town to make sure that that's okay with the municipal plan. Like, there is a designated village area and there could be parking restrictions or something in the plan.
It's come about in such a time frame that I haven't checked on anything, and I don't know that it would really be. I mean, I will if you tell me that it's contingent on receiving it. That was their thinking, that it could be overflow parking, but even if it was not overflow parking, it could potentially be something else.
Do we know what that 2-acre parcel would add to the tax, I assume we pay property taxes on our buildings, no? Schools are exempt from property taxes.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, it might be, Lisa raises a good point to just make sure that at some point to check before we would develop it, make sure that it adheres to the town's.
Definitely.
But I don't know that precludes moving forwards.
What?
No, I don't think it does.
Right?
So maybe we could just make a motion, and then I just want to publicly thank the St. Pierre's for thinking of the school district.
Yes.
They've been great supporters of the school and the community for many, many years, so it's a very generous gesture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I have one last question. Do you know who's gonna maintain it, like mowing it and,
It would be ours to figure
Yeah.
out.
so that would be a little bit of an incurred cost unless you had like a farmer hay it.
It'd be
and
hay. I think
take
it's hay right
the-
now.
Take the hay.
Yeah. I suspect that's what's happening.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so I'll make that motion to accept this very generous gift from the St. Pierre family. We'll do that by roll. Erin?
Yeah.
Kat?
Aye.
Oh, Emily?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Miranda? Lisa?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
That's all I have.
Okay, great, thank you so much. So we'll move on to our principal reports. Saving the best for last tonight, budget. And that's, you are up first, Rhoda.
I was just gonna add to my report that we did have a data day, this Tuesday. Yesterday. It was we had a really good, time looking at a lot of different data. We started with our SEL Savers data and did a pretty deep dive into that data, and really looked at not just kids who came out as high risk, but what we can do to help teach some of those social emotional skills that some of our kids are lacking in different areas. So that was a really good time spent, and teachers really had some good insights into what they were seeing. And then we spent some time looking at both math and ELA data. So went into some more academic data, and we did that in grade level teams, and that we started that work, and they are going to continue the protocol that they started with in their PLC time next week. So it was a good start to looking at that data and really doing some of these deeper dives into what those scores are looking like. And we did talk a little bit, especially at the middle school level, around some of how the timing does impact, because I knew that this audit was happening and had a chance to talk with them briefly. We've got more talking to do, but just kind of how we can look at those scores in relation to time that they do have for math and ELA, especially at the middle level, and how that impacts some of those scores, as well as intervention. So we have not had a math interventionist, and we do have one this year who is doing some intervention in the middle level, which has not happened in the past. Even with any interventionists we've had, they haven't always had opportunities to work with middle level kids who are struggling. So we have built more of that time in this year and are actually working currently on our schedule on changing a few things, which is tricky mid-year, but changing a few things to add some more intervention time for some of those middle level kids. So things have come out of those discussions, and we are going to continue to dig into that, but it was a really good time. And then, so we split our day on Tuesday with doing that data dive, and then the second part of our time that we had for professional development was spent with Tim Stanley, who is our behavior interventionist, or BCBA.
Or board certified behavior analyst.
Yes. And he did some work with everybody, with all of our teachers, and is going to have a separate session with our paraeducators on just some places we can tighten up around our procedures and policies around behavioral things that we're doing. So like when we ask kids to take a break, what that looks like, and how to be consistent on that across our school, and what it looks like when we send them to the student support center, and how that process works. So just getting clearer and more consistent on some of those processes. It was a good time.
So then, so for academic proficiency, we also, yesterday we had our day today. Our K2 team continued to focus on internal reading and math assessments. Our 3rd through 8th grade was focusing mainly on the writing benchmarks as well in order to target instruction. And then our math group was focusing, they initially shifted a little bit away from content specific, once again towards portrait of learning standards, particularly self-efficacy, and how they were going to build that build that for our students in terms, once again, of math and science instruction. As we continue to work, and I work very closely with that group, we continue to shift towards mainly perseverance and specific skills that we want to work with our students in order to put forward when they're addressing difficult problems. In addition to that, we also have begun our process of rolling out cognitive formative assessments. These are formative assessments that are standards-based. It is meant to emulate the Cognia assessment. However, what this serves is a very useful way for us to have universal benchmarks, to have those checks for student progress regarding specific standards. So then, once again, we can take that data, see where students are in regards to that, and plan instruction accordingly and intervention. In terms of socio-emotional learning, while our core subject teachers were focusing on specific content-related standards, our UA team worked with our SEL interventionist to start looking at the SABRS assessments in order to help make sure that we're addressing the SEL component in our instruction as well. In addition to that, we did just recently wrap up a combined effort from our UA team and our middle school team in order to help improve classroom student behavior in the middle school level. And that largely came from us beginning to not only revise our PBIS rewards matrix for our students and our expectations, but also identify specific academic behavior skills that we wanted to make sure that we had standardized across the classes so that we could explicitly teach it to our students. And those behaviors could include things such as, what does silent attention look like? How do you enter a classroom? How do you exit a classroom? How do you work in small groups? What do voice levels sound like? What are our expected voice levels? And so we've started to roll that out as well. So far, it's a little early to tell, but we have begun to see a drop in planning room referrals, which is a very encouraging first step.
Fantastic.
And then with student-centered learning, this past November 14th and 16th, we held our student-led conferences. Over the course of these 2 evenings, we welcomed a total of 53 families. Now, when we account for siblings as well, that puts us at about a third of the community participating, which has been where we've been in the past. So one of the things is, although we're excited to have that number of families join us, that does also lead us to also begin to examine ways that we can try to bring in more families as well. Our end goal, of course, is 100%, and so although we have a good first step, we still have some ways to get to 100% as well.
Gavin, I just want to point out before we move on, I appreciated your spotlight, and I didn't say that earlier, but the shift that has been made to really focus on instruction and the evidence base behind the learning. I'm really excited to see the outcomes you get from the way that you have shifted the time your teachers are spending and the what and how they're spending that time. I think you're going to see some really positive outcomes, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Sandy. We also had a day-to-day, as everybody did, so I won't repeat everything that everyone else has said, but we did split the day up a little bit, and we also did take some time with the 3rd through 8th grade teachers to introduce the cognitive formative assessments, which we are pretty excited about. And I got super excited and went and created all the rosters because I got the training from Mary Ellis the other day. So like while it was fresh in my mind, so all of our teachers have all of their rosters ready to go, and they were getting excited about it. I could tell. So it really reminded me a lot of SBAC when I started creating the rosters. But so that was good. But on kind of more of a fun note, I've had 2 really interesting phone calls or Zoom meetings in the last 2 days. Yesterday I spoke with Channel 5 meteorologist Marissa Virginie. I don't know how to say her last name. I don't know if any of you have seen the Channel 5 does Fridays weather at your school. So Montgomery is officially registered for January 26th to have at 4:30 in the morning, no less.
Oh yeah.
They'll be broadcasting live from out in front of the school. So we won't be there. She said we do not need to be there at 4:30, but she has to start her broadcast at 4:30, and it goes till 8 o'clock. So and I hesitated for a moment to schedule it because it's also one of our ski days. But the more we talked about it, the more exciting that was, because that gives us a little bit of uniqueness compared to some of the other schools that she broadcasts from. So
You'll get clips of kids walking off buses carrying their skis and snowboards.
She's done at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And we don't board the buses. But yeah, she'll
coming
see
to
them all
school,
coming in dressed up in their stuff. And
Did you say WCAX?
No.
WPTZ?
I don't know what the letters are.
Okay.
WPTZ Channel 5.
NBC Channel 5.
Got it.
I don't know. The W part. So that was kind of fun. And then today, well, I've been working on this for a bit, but we are now part of the National Archery in the Schools program. So I met with the state coordinator, spoke with the state coordinator today on the phone. And not only are we'll be getting all this equipment, this starter kit, which is like $10,000 worth of archery equipment. And then they come and train the people in our school who will be responsible, like the PE teacher and probably our after-school coordinator, so that we can spread it out. And then after my conversation today, Montgomery is going to be hosting the training for the people that are coming from the other schools who are also, there were 10 kits, I guess,
Great.
available. And after I met a month ago or so, there was 1 kit left, and I happened to be talking to Beth, so Richford's involved too. So.
Great. So it's both of your
We
schools
know
that got the
equipment,
kits?
don't we? We ought to be able to do the training.
I know, we should. Awesome, thanks Sandy, that's fantastic.
Those are fun, interesting, fun little things that are, it just adds a little twist.
Terry Sue.
We had a day-to-day too. I want to highlight that a little bit, but I have 2 other things to highlight, but we'll start with day-to-day. My staff has been a little leery of this upcoming day-to-day. When I asked them when I first started their experience using data, it was pretty negative and had sometimes in the past, not recent past, but had been used against them as teachers, so they were very nervous. My very first interaction with them back in August at the very first in-service day, I used Ted Lasso videos to, to show what my style of leadership is and just to kind of break some of the ice. So I started the day-to-day yesterday with some Ted Lasso isms. And I told them, did you really think they were going away? Because they know I really think Ted Lasso has some good lessons built into the show. So I started with that, and we started with just looking at the academic side of the whole school as one piece of data rather than breaking it down to the class level or the grade level or the class level. We just focused on the whole building. And we did the 5-act data protocol, which is what I've used most of my career for data dives. So we talk about it without the emotional connection to it. So they don't take it personally. It just becomes where are we at? What does it look like? What do you notice? Do you notice patterns, connections, etc.? So that warmed them up. It started with the first 10 minutes or so of them trying to come up with excuses or reasons why it looked the way it did, which is what I was trying to veer away from, but I kind of let them do that little purging, and then finally some more of the observations started surfacing. What are things they noticed and patterns they were noticing? So we did that for the first third of the time. The second third, I taught them how to look at Saber's data for the SEL stuff, and suddenly I saw 100, for that, it was 100% engagement. They were curious, they weren't being judgmental, they were lots of discussions going on in the room. I had an SU person there actually for part of our data dive, and she was even just amazed at the conversations going on. It was super interesting and productive. They were excited. And then the last third, they broke into small little groups and had to work together, and they could choose whether academic or SEL data they wanted to look at. They could drill it down as far as they wanted, but they had a protocol to follow, and then a worksheet they had to fill out, which held them accountable. They had to focus on something that was a success with the data they were looking at, something that they saw as a challenge, what their next step was going to be. They had to set a goal and tell me what supports they needed in order to meet that goal. And they're going to be held accountable for this. And most of them at the end of the 3 hours were like, wait, that was 3 hours, which was the coolest thing to ever hear. I didn't see a single person not engaged in the data or with at least a peer or multiple peers trying to go, ooh, how am I going to use this now to make a change? And they were super excited when they left. They were even asking me, so the next half day we have a data dive, right? So we can take our January data and actually do something with it. So I didn't expect this culture of looking at data and using it to be so fast successfully. I thought it was going to take me a couple years to get them to be a data culture, but they're excited now, and they've left. And I have teachers going, I thought more about it, and this is what I want to do. So it was really successful, and I felt really good that I could show them that data doesn't have to be a weapon, that it can actually be something used for good. So that's my first thing. Another thing we got back to rolling was our peer mentoring with our big kids, kind of getting matched up and mentoring our little kids, which they did last year, and it was good. But this year, the new counselor and our NCSS behavior tech or consultant titles, were really intentional about which of the middle schoolers they matched up with which of the littles. It is phenomenal seeing what's going on. We have these kids going in, and sometimes what the kid needs is just a break to play or socialize. They're in the classrooms helping, like a para would, helping teach and do interventions with kids. It is the coolest thing to see. And the kids are growing academically and get excited. Oh, today's my day with my mentor. And so the mentor will be in the room and helping not just them, but their friends. It's going amazing. And because I come from bigger schools, I'm used to 350 or 500 kids in a building, no problem. I noticed our staff has started, kind of becoming islands again. It's sometimes not, so they don't know that somebody's having the success in their rooms. So 3 weeks ago, I started sending out on Sunday nights the little victories that I was noticing the first time. So, I mentioned, hey, I noticed this student is having this, or ODRs have gone down. It's another little victory. And after the first one, I sent out, here's a Google form. Every time you have one that you want to share with staff, let's be more connected. And so we've done 3 weeks now, and they're sharing their little victories. And I think this last one I remembered to include Courtney and Lynn. But so just today I was looking, I have 7 more little victories that were added now that I can share out on Sunday night. So the staff is starting to feel connected again because they get to share what the successes they're seeing. And I call them little victories because sometimes it's the little things that mean so much more to our staff than, oh yay, we had another awesome Bears assembly, which we did. But that's the big picture. They want to share those little moments in their classroom. The student I couldn't reach all year, suddenly they're blending words. They're doing the blended sounds. They're doing great. So we have that going now too, on top of everything else, just to try to keep that community feeling positive for each other.
Lynn, I have a question about conferences. Terry Sue is having great success, 86% attendance rate, and Berkshire has whatever Gavin just said, a 33%.
Well, and ours actually goes up because I made them make phone calls and have phone conferences after the fact because I didn't like 86%. I didn't think it was good enough.
So, what do you see demographics figuring into this from the different schools?
I don't know, to be honest with you, because this is the first time these just happened. So this board report is the first time, and I haven't had my principals together again. I think part of it is how do we put it out? How are parents signing up? And then I have seen success increasing those percentages when people have teachers make the calls home or the administrative assistants, where the question is when can you come, and trying to get people scheduled in. So I think that certainly looking at comparing some of the strategies might be helpful.
Yeah, and I was wondering how long has Berkshire, and Gavin said that this has been happening like this for a while. Do you remember this pre-pandemic, that the numbers were this low?
I don't know, I can't.
I wonder if that has something to do with it, because I don't ever remember such low turnout.
They were really high when from what I remember, but I will tell you, Lisa, it has been a challenge to figure out the just right way to re-engage families after the pandemic. And I think that there's still more of a comfort sometimes participating not in person.
And is that an option? Can they do Zoom conferences?
I made, after the initial days, I said, you have to get in contact. I didn't give them a choice. I said, I expect you to get in contact with your families. You can provide it at this point. They can schedule a time with you that works for them. You can do it by phone. You can do it via Google Meets. And so we did have 2 do it virtually, but the rest did it via phone.
Yeah.
And then we still had 4 or 5 families that just won't answer phones and don't engage.
Because I wonder if that is part of it now. People have gotten used to not driving to the school, because a lot of Berkshire people don't work in Berkshire. So maybe that's another way to reach out to them, to do a video conference of some kind.
We have offered that as well to be an option, but I do think it's tricky when it's a student-led conference to be able to do that part of it.
Why? How does that make it different? Because isn't a student with his or her own
True,
parents?
but they wouldn't have the materials in front of them. It just gets a little bit trickier. They could talk to their parent there, and you can be a part of that
But
conversation.
can the teacher be there to show the material on the screen?
I just think it's harder. I'm not saying it's not
It might be
doable.
one of those things that, you know, certainly the preferred would be the face-to-face, but
Mm-hmm.
after we've made the calls and the attempts have gone out to get them to engage, maybe it's the,
Yeah.
well, could a virtual work so we can get there? And I will say sometimes there are families that are like, no, I'm good, I know they're doing okay. But there definitely are still people that don't wanna be in person.
It might be nice to find out why those parents aren't coming, you know? For some, it may be just a school situation, that their own school experience wasn't
Yeah.
a happy one, so they're
We've
not.
certainly seen that in different situations before. To be honest with you, it might be, there are families that the resource of driving to the school is really challenging as well.
Or the time.
Can I-
What time of day.
Can I just say a strategy with my kids' schools? For student-led conferences, one of my children had a stomach bug. It was right before Thanksgiving, so I didn't bring her. But her teacher reached out to me and said that she would even bring the folder home, so we could just do it at home because it's student-led.
Yeah.
So the teacher didn't really have to, I mean, I'm going right there, but that was another strategy.
One of the things that we want to do is we want to start surveying, and I at least I feel at Berkshire, one of the things might be, at least my impression as I've spoken with parents is, they may not, I say this with caution, it's not necessarily that they don't see the value in it, but they don't fully understand just how rich an experience it could be. And so I think that's one of the pushes we want to make as well, is to really try, when we have the parents with us, to really reinforce why this is a valuable investment of time, and how it's more than just simply getting a report of where your student's at. It's a chance really for your student to showcase where they're learning and really take ownership of their education as well, while also being able to receive that valuable feedback as well.
Are the student-led conferences that happen this fall, because like I know Montgomery does our student-led in the spring, but like for you other schools, is it during the school day or is it still after school hours? So Lisa, I mean, I think that's why it would be more difficult. Like I would think it would be hard for a child who maybe relies on the support of the teacher. I know they're leading it, but I think there's still kind of a support system in place, you know, for that child to do it virtually if they're at home with their parents after school. Yeah, sorry, I had one other thing, but I forgot.
Yeah, ours were held in the normal conference evenings. Our parents didn't really know what to expect, and afterwards I got a lot of positive comments, and the kids themselves were so nervous beforehand, and because I was present for a number of them, some students invited me to come to some of theirs, so I got to see them across the grades. It was kind of fun, but they afterwards, they were like, oh, that wasn't bad at all, and they were super proud of themselves and excited for doing it, so.
That's great.
So now we're getting the word out that, hey, this is actually really good, and but it's that, it's the early adopters who have
That's
to
right.
spread the word that it's a good thing, so.
That was my
Yeah.
other question. Did you guys find it hard, or did the teachers provide feedback? Because I was also surprised to see it was being done like within a month or so of school, which didn't seem like a lot of time being new to the school, the teachers and the students to prepare versus like, you know, I always think of the springtime ones as like they have a whole year almost under their belt. They've worked with the teacher, they've got like a whole portfolio of work kind of to present. So I just wondered if you guys experience any challenges with that aspect.
I'm gonna just interrupt, and I'm sorry, and I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm trying to be cognizant that it's already 8:30, so I think it's a really valuable conversation. And Kat, if you're amenable, maybe we could put a pin in the discussion about the student-led conferences and maybe punt it to a kind of a separate agenda item for next month. It seems as though there's some questions and quite a lot of interest in it, but I'm aware of at least probably 45 minutes-ish of budget discussions, and then everyone still has to drive home.
Our aim, to be honest, was to be really brief tonight so that he could have like an hour.
Yeah, 45 minutes sounds
think we need to,
ambitious,
yeah.
so, if that's all right with everyone, given the late hour.
Does anyone need a bathroom break before this then?
Thank you. He's been sitting there so efficiently.
So this is data, the student-led conference was data that I was planning to bring for like the board monitoring plans. We'll do the percentage of students with PLPs and the percentage of students who did student-led conferences. Those are markers under our student-centered learning goal. But there are two strategies that what they were told this year is they have to have a minimum of one student-led conference per year, but some places are doing both as student-led. So, and some keep it in the spring.
Do you think Kat heard that? Because that was Kat's question.
Some schools, our expectation this year was that they had to have at least one student-led conference during the year. So some have chosen to do that in the fall. It was just before Thanksgiving. Some have chosen to do it in the spring, and some will do it twice. So they're all in different places, and some have done student-led conferences for years and years, and some are in the very first time of ever doing a student-led conference. So we have very different entry points, and I'll bring data back as part of the board monitoring plan. The percentage of students that participate in student-led conferences and connections to the PLPs will be part of that data set that comes back.
Okay. And Mary, can you add one other thing for next time?
Absolutely. What's that, Kat?
Because I just wanted to give an update from the Regional Advisory Board for Cold Hollow Career.
Okay.
But I do want to just make one announcement because I think it is happening in the next week. Nate told me that all of the sending schools from NMV will be doing their annual visit to the Career Center on December 15th.
Nice.
Like all the 8th graders
Yeah.
from those sending schools. But I'll give, a further update as time allows, if time allows next month.
Yeah, perfect, Kat. We'll make a note of it.
Okay, thank you.
And prioritize, make sure that as well as a more in-depth conversation about, okay, we can do hard things.
We can.
Everyone ready?
We're ready.
All right. Morgan, you're up.
So every day is a day-to-day in my world.
Touche.
Let's see if one. We will go through the FY25 budget, the slideshow, and then we'll do a deeper dive into the numbers. I will, one of the first things I will do to this budget when I go back to the office tomorrow is add a little bit in Gavin's heating line.
Good.
For his building.
It seems like right now, I took a look at it seems like it's blowing out cold air right now.
Yeah, it is. Did you push the button? It's on vacation. If you push the button 3 times, it'll trip it up a few degrees.
This thermostat over here?
Did you? They moved it.
Now's a good time to put us all to sleep.
I'm looking at this.
I thought it was done on purpose to keep it cold.
Actually,
It's not the normal up because when it used to be on that wall, I just had to hit it 3
Well,
times.
it says right now it's just set to 77.
It's on
It's at 69 degrees.
It automatically goes to evening.
It's on evening mode, so that's why you have to hit the up.
I just requested.
So just keep hitting it?
Yeah, then that's good. Should give you 3 degrees.
It stops me at 77. But it shouldn't have been, it never should have gone down to 69 to begin with, though. That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
It's blowing cold air. Do you know how to shut
Yeah,
it in? Blower?
I'll text for him.
I'm
All right, let's go to Morgan.
All right, budget.
Next slide, please, Courtney. So this is your schedule. We're here at December 6th, your third board meeting. The one change here is that we actually do have the first draft of your pupil count. So that came a couple weeks early, and we will be showing the impact of that later on this evening. Your annual meeting warning, in your in-person meeting, you will elect a moderator and a clerk, and then by ballot, you have 3 positions that are open. One in Berkshire, which is Lisa's seat currently, one in Montgomery, which Kat holds, and then one in Sheldon, which Emily holds. And as of this time, I think all 3 of you are planning to run again, and the petitions will be due, I believe it's January 30th to Emily Fecteau, the Berkshire Town Clerk, but I will confirm the dates with you, and I will send those petitions out. And then if anyone hears of other folks who are interested in running in any of those 3 towns, they can reach out either directly to Emily or via me, and we'll get them the information.
I don't
Do
need
they
a petition, I've already got mine.
Okay. And
There's also information on our website about
Okay.
how to run.
and you can have anybody in any of the 4 towns sign those petitions.
Oh, I didn't know that, Morgan. For some reason, I thought it had to be someone in your town
No.
to sign the petition. Okay.
I think that was the thing we debated the most when we were
Yeah,
there.
and I don't know, I just didn't remember that.
So again, your general budget objectives, I have the 3 board goals up here just to kind of remind us and ground us in the discussion. We will show that to the visitors that come for your budget meeting in March or in February. We'll also show them the enrollment projections that we have, the next slide. We have gone over this in the past. The only thing I would tell you or remind you is that you can see from 2019 to 2020, there's a kind of the COVID drop. We will next year see again the impact of that kind of disappear. So I expect there'll be some movement on the enrollment, but that little bump will be out of there. We've gone over this before as well, but some of the drivers in this budget, we've talked a lot about the increase in social emotional needs. We've talked a lot about the change coming from Act 127, and we'll do a little deeper dive of that again later. COVID funding expiring in FY25. PCB remediation we've touched on. The health insurance increase of 16.4%, which is, I believe, a little higher than last year, but seems to be kind of the new normal. We have not had any meetings yet with your support staff union. I have budgeted what I am hoping is enough of an increase in there, but we will not have that contract settled likely until after this budget is, certainly after this budget is warned and probably after this budget is voted on. And then as I mentioned in the past, we have a relatively small graduating senior class in terms of kids you're paying tuition bills for. And we have a pretty large 8th grade class that is coming in next year to high school to backfill that. The staffing changes, as I mentioned in the document that I sent out to you earlier today, I have not made any changes to the discussion that we've had at your last board meeting, and obviously have not incorporated any of the conversation tonight. But to recap, in Bakersfield, this budget is showing an additional day of music and an additional 2 days of a family engagement coordinator. That family engagement coordinator is a position that's moving in from the ESSER grant. In Berkshire, we've budgeted for a half-time health teacher. We've removed that interventionist position that we talked about. There's an additional paraeducator, and then 3 days of a family engagement coordinator. Most of that is coming from the ESSER grant, and the idea there is that between Bakersfield and Berkshire, we would have a 1.0 FTE. And then also in Berkshire, the addition of an assistant principal position. In Montgomery, rounding up the current 0.5 PE teacher to a 1.0 to cover halftime health as well. There's an addition of a little bit more than one paraeducator, 1 day of a family engagement coordinator, and that's service that they're currently getting from someone under the ESSER grant, and then bringing their nighttime, halftime custodian up to full-time. In Sheldon, addition of a health teacher, addition of a some sort of elective teacher. I'm showing that as the STEM teacher. 4 days of a family engagement coordinator. So again, that would be combining with Montgomery to entice someone with a full-time job. And then a combined office assistant, half-time paraeducator position. District-wide, we were talking about removing that district-wide health teacher that we've not been able to fill, and that's kind of driving some of the additions at the school level. And then we talked about adding a 1.0 SRO to be shared across the 4 schools. When we go into the annual meeting, this is how the warning will read, and we'll be deciding by early January what that big scary number is going to be. This has been updated, and it will continue to get tweaked as we move along. This is the pie chart that shows the things that we buy. So in this, you can see that red half on the right are the costs of your people. So staff that you're paying for directly. The big section there is what we're spending in actual salaries, and then you go to health insurance, and then you go to some of their other benefits. The big light blue chunk of the pie to your bottom left is primarily services that we buy. So tuition is a big chunk of that. And then up above, you've got other services in that extremely light blue wedge. That's primarily services that you receive from the supervisor union. So the biggest chunk of that is special ed teachers. After that, it's food service. After that, it's transportation. And then there's the other more traditional central office functions that are in there.
Is anybody else having trouble reading that?
I sure am, and I can send this out as a PDF after the meeting.
Okay.
This looks at your same budget, but it's more based on the things that we do rather than the things we buy. So that green section is what we consider instruction. It's direct instruction. It's kind of what you traditionally think of as teachers in the classroom here. And then again, that big section at the bottom are your tuition payments to other schools. It'll work through, as you go along with some of those things that are more like services, kind of going around the clock, student support, things like guidance counselors, instructional support would be librarians, technology, professional development, school administration, and then that big blue wedge again is primarily your central office. So that's going to be special ed, transportation, food service. And I will send this out to folks so that they have a copy they can read. So we've gone over this, but I want to highlight it again because it is incredibly important as we get into the discussion on the tax rates. Act 127 was passed, I think, 4 years ago. In Vermont, there's a constitutional requirement for equal access to funding. The way that we've done that since Act 60, back in I think around 2000, is that we took the students that you have in your building and we adjusted those counts based on different weights to try and get at which kids cost more to educate than others. So the obvious one is that kids who are coming to your schools not speaking English, or in a family where they don't speak English, obviously there's a bigger lift there to bring them up. Kids that are in poverty are historically more expensive to educate. High school kids, middle school kids, I think primarily because of the different classes that you offer, tend to cost more than, say, an elementary school kid or a pre-K kid. So that's the concept behind it, and that's how we get to that equal access. When they passed Act 60, it sort of basically made guesses. They said, okay, well, we think this kind of kid costs this much more to educate than this kind of kid. Act 127 was really an effort to dig into the science and put some more defensible numbers behind that. So Act 127 changed the weighting factors pretty significantly, but it didn't change the overall concept that some kids cost more to educate than others, and we need to figure out a way to equalize that around across different towns that have different student populations. So as they made that implementation, the concept, the intention behind it was that districts who were advantaged, districts who were picking up more kids, would be able to raise more money for the same tax rate, and so better support those learners. Not necessarily to take that as a windfall and push it back as a tax cut. Disadvantaged districts, districts who saw a relative loss of the number of kids, were given a 5-year transition period so that they had a longer runway to kind of bring their spending in line, or at least ease that tax rate increase into their constituents if they weren't going to bring that in line. So that's the concept that's behind it. There's some other factors that we can go into. That 5-year phase-in, the costs of that are shared across all the districts. So that's a challenge that we're kind of navigating on a state level now as we start to see towns tip where their budgets are going to come in and whether they're going to get the benefit of that 5-year phase-in. You can go to the next one. So in the budget that we're going to go over tonight, I've kind of projected out what the tax rate would be. So your FY24 final column is the budget year that we're living in, and it's based on the budget that your voters approved last year. If you look at that FY25 proposed column, you'll see an increase, pretty significant increase in expenses, a drop in some of that local revenue for an education spending amount that is up more significantly than we've seen in the past. You'll also see that long-term membership, your per pupil count is up hugely, and that's where you're seeing the benefit of those weights. So if you look at the per pupil spending amount, which is the amount that we use to compare ourselves to other districts, and it's the amount that's ultimately going to drive your tax rate, you'll see that that's also dropped significantly for a figure of 10,942. On that FY25 change column, I've kind of blocked 3 of those out because the pupil count is being counted so differently that a year-to-year comparison doesn't really make sense. And then the dollar yield, which was set in the December 1 tax letter, which I had sent out to you last week, has dropped significantly to offset those pupil counts. But you'll see that for proposing a $3.8 million increase in education spending, the impact on your tax rate would be less than a penny increase. And so again, that is all the effect of this first year of implementation of Act 127. When we go into FY26, FY27 for whatever budgets we're working on at that time, we'll see some changes in that pupil count, but they're going to be significantly smaller because now we're really just getting to what's the year-to-year change in terms of the kids who are showing up. So I know that's a quick run through. I feel like I can do this with this board because everyone's heard this a couple of times before at least, but I'm happy to pause there and answer any questions if that's useful.
Can you just clarify, Morgan, that last statement you made about as we head into FY26, FY27, as part of this kind of 5-year implementation, you're saying it's going to continue to be favorable for us and support our ability to, maintain and add what we are opportunities, staffing, what we're providing students for a rather nominal increase in taxes.
Correct. You're just not going to see this huge increase in pupils each year. I actually think if all things being equal, in theory, the dollar yield should start to move back up as fewer towns get that cap that allows them to slowly move to what their actual tax rate is. So those towns that have historically spent a lot more and have lost equalized pupils as we stop paying for that soft landing, the yield is gonna come up and that'll push down tax rates statewide.
So Morgan, just to recap something really quickly, because our long-term membership weighted has gone up, we're technically allowed more spending at a very limited increase in our tax. But when I look at this, you know, like the budget is up $3.5 million, right? The budgeted expenses.
Spending plan, yep.
Yeah, so that means we have this leeway as one of the towns that's getting reorganized, I guess, for lack of a better word, because we're getting reevaluated because our pupils have more need. We're allowed to spend more within those constraints, but we're one of the towns that I think is being pointed to that is, you know, like, well, they're allowed to spend more money, so they are spending more money. I'd like an answer to that, to the people who say that. If you can maybe come up with something that would be helpful in the narrative that, well, we have this need and the state has now allowed, by passing Act 127, has now allowed us to expand our services to fill that need. But if the average person who didn't understand all of this is looking at that and saying, how can your budgeted expenses go up $3.5 million in 1 year? That's the amount of money we used to spend total on the budget in Berkshire. So I'm gonna get taxpayers say to me, like, that used to be our whole budget and that's your increase this year.
Mm-hmm.
So going forward, as we publicize what our budget is gonna be, I think we need to think carefully about how to answer that question and what is driving that increase in expenses and how that's justified under this new law.
So I think those are all valid concerns. I think what I would do is first point to the intention of the law. I would describe that change in the pupil count as, you know, these kids have always been here and we have never had the opportunity to invest in them the way that other districts have been able to invest in them. I have to kind of keep my class hackles down a little bit because I think it's when I'm talking to people statewide, I hear this a lot from the districts that have been spending a lot more per kid and are finally grappling with some of the hard conversations that we have always had to grapple with here. We'll get into the details and we've put in, for us is a large increase for opportunities like field trips for kids that we've never been able to do before. Those are feeling like big increases to us, and those are still rounding errors to some districts. And so, I think I would tie it back to the pupil count is really a reflection of the population that you're serving, and we know that we have a population that has greater needs than other parts of the state, and we have not been able to fund those programs in the past.
I think you put it really well last year, Morgan. One of the times that we were talking about something in the legislative session is that for decades we've had to educate our students that have had really significant needs, and this is reaffirmed with the weights, with just so much less. We've gone without, and we've underfunded for a long time, so we've diminished the opportunities. We had diminished opportunities compared to other students in other systems. So the moral of the story is that the zip code impacted the opportunity. And with the shift in the looking at the weighted long-term membership, the intention is to make the zip code matter less, so that we have the opportunity to add these pieces in a way that doesn't also harm our community, who's, we understand if their tax rate went up, in the old funding system accordingly, we never would be able to offer these opportunities. But this is a perfect example of why this is creating more equitable opportunities, because we're able now to do these things and it isn't coming directly from our taxpayers.
Yeah, and I think I would also recommend, as people are out in the community, to point to the specific things that are in the budget. So we'll get into the details, but high school tuition is up almost $1 million, and once other schools start announcing their tuition rate, it may drift up to $1 million more. That's something that you don't have any control over. But where we do have control, we're never spending money to spend money. We're seeing that, I think, most obviously right now in the alternative program that we're trying to develop at the SU level, and that we think we're doing better by kids, and we think we're going to do it for a lower price. And it was really more of a necessity that drove it. I don't think if we had a lot of placements, we'd be engaging in that creative thinking. But when we see that need, we're not making those moves to spend more money because we can.
I think those are all really important points for anybody who might be viewing this meeting, like how we're going about budget development. We're not just seeing that we have an extra $5 million to throw around and we're gonna start programs or hire people or build in things that we don't need into the budget. And I think the perception might be out there when folks see the increase. I don't know how you're gonna present it on the report, but we'll see that. But I think it's very important for people to understand that that's not what we're doing here.
I think the other place, and Morgan said something about it, at least in the goals, was the amount of support we've had to build into the budget around supporting the increased mental health challenges that we're facing in schools. The reality is this budget is up a lot, and it is education plus, right? Because we're funding things we did not used to have to fund through the education system. So I think that's another important factor to remember, is that our mental health agencies are underfunded, understaffed, and under-resourced, and our needs have increased, so we have had to increase our services pretty significantly. So it's definitely not a, just throwing things in to spend the money. They're very purposeful, and they're very tied to those 3 targets for our students.
Yeah, I think that's really important to bring in the mental health piece, because we were at a meeting at NCSS the other day, and they said they have so many positions that they can't fill, and if they could fill them, you being the school would rather not be in the business of providing those supports, but because they don't exist in our community, because of workforce shortages and other things and funding, we have to do it here at the school level.
Very true.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, and I know Lynn's been speaking a lot at the State House about beefing up the mental health system. But if NCSS doesn't have the capacity to serve a potential client, they don't serve that potential client. If we don't have the capacity to serve a potential student, we still serve them because we don't have an option.
And that's the thing, I think, that education has changed over time, and I think that's the piece that's hard for our communities to contend with, because I think there's a temptation to think about what our own adult experiences may have been 20 or 30 or 40 years ago when we were in the public school seats, and it is a very different reality. So I think that hopefully we're going to really work hard on the communication piece of this, and what we're aiming for is better outcomes for our students. And with our ability to be able to put in different opportunities for our students, the theory of action there is that by creating more equitable outcomes for them, we're going to get, or more equitable opportunities, we're going to get more equitable outcomes, which really impacts all of us positively. Because if we could do better by our students academically and help to fill some of the social emotional learning, mental health needs that they have, that has a tremendously positive impact on all of our communities. And it can have a multi-generational impact over time. So that hopefully we can help to communicate about those factors.
So this is just tracking the homestead tax rate. 20 through 24 are the actual numbers. And this is pre-CLA. And the FY25, the last dot on there is what's projected with the budget in front of you. And we'll leave the slideshow there because we don't have CLA numbers yet, so I haven't updated that. You can pull this one up. I will shoot those along. You can take one of each of those, and this is not updated from what I sent by email.
Okay, so we have it on our.
So you have it on email if you don't want it. There's a bunch of others.
But I still have to take a look.
It
is the
but you also
center?
have it in email.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with the with what's up on the screen or the document that's colored. The section in red is your expense budget at a very big picture level. So your first two lines are what we consider direct instruction, and that first line is what we're spending, basically what we're spending in your schools for the most part, and then the second line of tuition payments is what we're sending out of the schools. So you'll see that tuition line in this budget is up $873,000. That is primarily a function of the that big 8th grade class replacing a small 12th grade class. Right now I'm just projecting out tuition rates based on the ones that I'm seeing come in now. And we also do not have the numbers for your tech center students yet. And so I've just rolled over the number from last year. Unlike your high school students, the tech center students we pay on a rolling average, so the state's going to tell us what FTE we have to pay to each school, although they still set their tax rates. I'll call your attention to the third line there. Special education is currently listed at 0. This line are your paraeducators who are providing special ed services. Right now, they're all of your paraeducators are rolled up in direct instruction. At some point when we look at their schedules this year, I will likely make some assumptions and pull whatever the number is, $500,000 down out of direct instruction into special education. But it's all the same people. It's just how we're tracking their expenses. Next lines, 2 lines are athletics and co-curricular. You'll see some increases there, and I tipped to that a little bit earlier that we did go in and just kind of look at the historical spend for some of those opportunities that our kids have or have had in the past. Year over year, maybe a big increase, but relatively small potatoes compared to things like staffing and tuition. In that second section, support services, student support, primarily your guidance counselors and nurses. Instructional support is primarily librarians, technology, and then professional development for teachers. General administration is the board and a lot of the sort of district level insurances that we pay for, and things like your your legal budget and some of those smaller things. And as you go through the detail of the budget, you'll see costs broken out in the same way. School administration is largely principals, their support staff, and the principal's budget. Increase there is largely driven by that additional assistant principal position in Berkshire. Central services is the supervisor union assessment. Can take a minute to explain some of the big increases there. Part of that is NMV is growing relative to Eastburg Richford as a district, so you're getting a little bit more, a bigger share of the SU pie. Again, this budget is primarily your special ed teachers and that alternative program. It is your food service where we're seeing a big increase in costs, and then transportation where we're seeing our first year of being able to budget accurately for the contract that we bid out maybe 18 months ago, a year ago. There are some positions from ESSER that are moving into the central office budget. Primarily it's the 3 instructional coaches, the FPA staff, and then Michelle Irish, the director of the advancement of educational equity. Buildings and grounds is the cost to keep your buildings up. What I have added in here, which we've not seen in the past, is a not insignificant chunk of change for more longer term maintenance projects. So what we've done in the past is hope that we get lucky on tuition kids and try to quickly spend that money by the end of the year for some of those bigger construction projects or bigger repair projects. We've also been, as we've come in under budget, been taking half of that money and getting voter permission to put that into a reserve fund, and then we've tapped those reserve funds for some of those projects as well. This year, throughout the 4 schools, you'll see about $169,000 budgeted to do those projects within the current budget year. That number is likely less than we spend, but I think it's a starting point to put some money in and start recognizing that we have old buildings and they are going to need more than just cleaning the floors each year. Transportation is up large. That's in part moving some funds out of different areas where they weren't correctly captured, but this is where you'll see the increase that we've put in to allow the schools to offer more educational field trips. The transportation in terms of going to and from students is up in that central services. Debt service continues to drop down each year as we have smaller and smaller interest payments, so you're seeing a decline there. And then that gets us to the final number of 22.9 at the end of the expense section. I'll pause there if there are any big picture questions, and we can get into the line by line detail, but I don't know if anybody has anything they want to ask about, what's included where, or I think I've touched on all the big moves. It's primarily, obviously, always primarily staffing. Most of it is in that instruction line.
Morgan, can you just clarify the transportation, because that is not our entire, the transportation budget at the SU level is a monster number.
Yes, so that transportation is really just for school-specific field trips, sports trips, things like that.
Okay.
The transportation bringing kids from their home to school and back is part of that 2.6 million.
The central services, gotcha. Food and transportation.
And special ed.
And special ed, okay, gotcha, thank you.
Morgan, what's driving the food service up so much? Is it the actual cost of food, or are we getting a different quality food?
It's the actual cost. We've seen a pretty dramatic increase over the last 2 years. The revenue side is been pretty stable and pretty good with the universal meals program. Obviously, that's impacting yield, so it does impact your tax rate, and we're all paying for it. But that has certainly been helpful. But the year-over-year increase in food has been pretty significant. And I know I've asked. Dawn gave me some initial estimates, and they felt high to me. I've asked her to look over them again. After food costs, the next cost is labor, and she's actually cut staffing a little bit in her proposed budget. The support staff we're sort of catching up to the last settlement. So in the last support staff agreement, we offered them dental insurance, so their benefits have gone up on top of the 16% increase in health insurance. And then the boards were very generous in terms of their hourly rate because we were having such a hard time finding people.
Yeah.
So it's a long way of saying food. If you look at the revenue section, the big difference here is in that state revenue line. And what's going on here is that under Act 127, schools either get the merger support grants, which we've had in the past to the tune of a little over $200,000, or they get additional weighting for kids who are in small schools. And you get the better of those two. We were advantaged by using that small schools count because we're not only able to count the kids that are in Bakersfield and Montgomery Elementary, we're also able to get some benefit for the kids that are Berkshire Elementary. Berkshire was never small enough to get a small schools grant, but they're getting some benefit from those rates. So it's not an in-out, it's increasing your ed spending, but we are seeing a benefit later on. And then that's replaced with a $50,000 grant that we will get for English language learners. For those students, you get both a weighting benefit and you get a categorical grant depending on how many kids you have. And the intent of that was to support districts like ours who have kids but not a huge number of them, and so it allows you to hire a teacher even if you don't have 50 kids or 100 kids who are meeting that category.
That's another example of a centralized service that shows up because we are funding that out of the SU rather than putting it into individual budgets, because what we found is those student populations can be relatively transient. So it wouldn't be cost effective for districts to be funding those when we really need to be able to deploy all over the SU.
So the cost of that is coming out on that central services line, and I should have tipped that, and that is the one new position that's in the SU budget. Everything else is for folks who already exist. And there was a long conversation at the SU level about whether it makes sense to have one teacher per district or have them both at the SU where you can deploy them where the need is. The last line in that section is the use of fund balance. Right now, we're anticipating about $150,000 money that was quote unquote left over from last year. And right now what I'm showing is, as in the past, you asking and the voters approving you to put half of that into a capital reserve fund. And this last section, the projected tax rates, again, is similar to what you saw on the slideshow. Just walks through your spending, less your revenue, and that gives you your education spending, now divided by that much bigger per pupil number gives you a per pupil ed spending of $10,942, and coming to a tax rate of $15.77. We do not have CLA numbers yet. They're on that, just sort of as a placeholder, but as we get those from the tax department, which is sometime between Christmas and New Year's, we can update that. And
Are there any reappraisals in any of our 4 towns? Do we know?
I don't believe there are any that are complete.
Are there any in process?
I think the reality is everyone's looking for someone to do it. And
Yeah.
there are no people who are doing it.
Okay.
I gather there's some possible legislation, Lisa, maybe you know about this, about the state taking it away from towns, which
Yeah,
really makes a lot of sense.
I just heard tonight that there's a third proposal that's kind of a hybrid between local, very local, and state, but I don't know any details.
Okay.
Our CLAs aren't too bad, right? I mean, 81 and 86% are better than some other towns that might be at like 61%.
Definitely better.
Yeah.
In theory, once it falls below 80, you're required to do a reappraisal. I would be surprised if none of our towns are below 80 once we get the final numbers. I think just the way that property sales are going, they probably have to drop somewhat. But yeah, you're right. There are some towns that are crazy low right now. If you want to go back to this slide, just slide it up.
Not this one.
That was last year. Yeah, so if you go down to 18. And so this is not updated for CLA, but this will show you when we get that what the individual tax rates are doing. So the actual figure that people see in their property tax bill, and you'll see FY22 to 23 to 24. The district level tax rate dropped pretty significantly. The town tax rates dropped and then came back up a bit, and that is largely because of the CLA and because of the real estate market. The property values are going up. If you go to the next slide, I've shown you this before, and it'll be easier to read when you get the PDF, but you'll see NMV and Enosburg Richford are those 2 dark lines at the bottom of the grid, closer to that $8,000 per pupil amount. The two dark lines in the middle of the grid are the Franklin County average and then the statewide average, and then each of those red lines are our other peers in Franklin County and where they're ending up. And again, this is per pupil spending for the year that we're living in now, so it's their current budget divided by that new weighted kid.
So the ones on the bottom, the 2 bottom ones are NMV and ER?
Yes. And I think this is not that different from what you've seen in the past, although we're seeing a couple of those Franklin County towns with the new weights have increased pretty dramatically. They've shot up.
I think this is always a really powerful visual to me, and I know taxes hurt. The taxes just came due last month in most of our communities, and they start hearing about next year, and I understand the cause for panic, and I know that every dollar counts for our taxpayers. I think when people are having conversations about responsible spending or efficiencies, we've been living in a world of efficiency and necessity and minimum for our kids. And so I think that even with the changes that we're able to make, I don't think that our per pupil spending is going to rise up to be comparable to some of the people at the top of that for this next year, even with the increases we put in there. So it's just a good reminder for people that even though it feels like a lot of money, it's still comparatively very low per pupil.
And I would wager that we're gonna see this spread increase before we see it level off, because of those caps under Act 127, there is this disincentive for some of those towns that are high spending to cut their spending as quickly as they would if the caps were not there. And so we may, it may be a while before we see this even out, but that is, I think, it's part of the intent of the law. So, assuming you're willing, we will have an article on the warning asking for half of the surplus to go into the capital reserve fund. And go to the next one. Again, it's a smaller number than in the past. An article asking for permission to borrow money. The lawyers continue to say we should have it on there and continue to say we can borrow money if we don't get it, but we'll put it on there. Wanted to bring back the conversation to changing the annual meeting. We talked about this in April and then touched on it again over the summer. Right now, by our bylaws, by law, we are voting for a moderator and a clerk at an in-person meeting on a specific day in February. We do kind of an informational bit on the budget there as well. But we had one person who was not associated with the school arrive last year. And so there are communities out there where everything is by Australian ballot, which means that moderator and clerk position are done by Australian ballot. There's still a requirement to do informational meetings, but you're not requiring your district clerk to come there and do voting. It's truly informational, so there's a little bit less of a structure, got more flexibility in doing it. I'm going to a meeting either way, so there's no skin off my nose which way you do it, but it was brought up in April, and so I didn't want to lose that. And if you do want to change that, we wouldn't change it for this year, but there would be an article explaining the potential change, and we would have the lawyers draft that up.
I feel like it may be time to change it, given how few people, have come to our last few annual meetings. I mean, I think we absolutely need to do the informational meeting. I think it's really important. I think it's incredibly important to get this information out in various ways and forms, digitally and hard copy, and none of that, but just this piece around voting for the moderator and the clerk seem unnecessary at this point, given that the budget is voted on at each town's individual town meeting day and no one comes. So that would be my 2 cents around it.
Does the school district still need a moderator if they don't have an annual meeting? Would they need it in case some other sort of meeting?
I think they do, but I don't think they ever do anything.
Okay. Unless you maybe had to have a district meeting for another reason.
Right.
But I think I was the moderator for last year's meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm certainly happy to continue to fill that role because I'll certainly be there for the informational meeting.
Because the one citizen who showed up declined politely to be moderator.
Yes.
I think we've given people a couple of years now since the pandemic to get back into going to public meetings. And I don't think if we kept it like this, we're probably not gonna see a huge influx of people coming to our meeting on whatever it is, February 17th or something like that. So I don't have an objection to putting an article on this year's warning to change that voting to the way we vote for school board members, for instance.
So I will figure out what that language needs to say, and I'll bring it to your next meeting, which in theory is when we warn the budget and sign the warning. And then the last bit of information, I'm confirming these still with the town clerks for two so far. But these are the polling locations for town meeting day voting. I don't believe any of them have changed. We will put this out. And then to kind of go back to Lisa, what you were talking about and the potential change in how we do the annual meeting, it's pretty scary to me to go into town meeting day and knowing that we've actively communicated with only one voter in the district. And so if any board members are hearing of ways to reach out to more people, we're certainly willing to get our folks there. We can do it in a way that we don't have the quorum of the board, so let's go into a meeting in the library or a coffee somewhere. If folks are out there, we'll go. We did it during 46.
Sure did.
And we're okay going places where people don't want to see us necessarily. And waving the flag. But,
we also are going to think about how we communicate on social media, and I mean that is the amount of people who are reading our communications is astounding to me. So we'll continue to look at ways in which we might be able to do some visual communication and maybe some video communication, and we might engage some of you in some of that. So we've got some strategies that we've been exploring too.
Our social media following is a lot, and we're in the process of switching over our website, so I will have the ability to post to all schools' social media with one click. So that will help as well. Hopefully we'll be done before budgets. Okay.
That's good.
And the last change around that is that we were moving towards this last year, that bigger format specific school district annual meeting book. We are going to be mailing out cards with the other towns to say that those books are available rather than being mailed to everyone, which we've done in the past, but we're gonna put them and bind them separately, and so they won't be in the town book. And I know for folks who've tried to read what we put in that little mini-me Berkshire town book, like nobody can read it because it's so small. So we'll have that big format out, and it'll be in a way that's friendly to push out electronically, which I know doesn't reach everyone, but it seems to be reaching greater and greater share of folks. And so at this point, I'm happy to answer any question on the big picture. I'm guessing you don't want to go through the 26-pager. It's something that you can do on your own, and my guess is if you find anything in there, it's probably based on a calculation mistake that we've made, so definitely let me know that. Unless something changes radically, I don't see the sense that you need to have any big conversations about, well, can we really afford that SRO? Do we need to add this person, or do we need to add a cut of program somewhere? Some of the things that I can see changing, we're working on the SU budget, and the SU board meets in another week and a half, and I think we're going to be able to bring in that one lower. has not, I don't think that we've reflected that yet in here. Obviously, that's up to that board to decide where we're going with that. As I mentioned, we don't have the VOC tuition numbers in yet. There are a few other benefits, things that we don't have information on, and then at the SU level, there's some revenue coming in that we don't have a figure for, so that could push the SU assessment up or down. And then lastly, I think I'm budgeting for the right number of high school kids, but we don't have any announced tuition rates for next year yet. Most of your kids go to Enosburg or Richford, and once we're done with this meeting, I'll be starting to work on their tuition rates, so I'll at least have a pretty accurate picture for most of the kids that we send.
And will you put in a slight buffer for kids that may move into the district this summer?
We can. What I've not done is reduced 8th grade for those kids that maybe have gone to Berkshire K-8 and then go to Enosburg High School and they have a parent in Enosburg. So we do, every year we see some loss there as well. So I kind of feel comfortable that those will even each other out.
Right.
When we've changed that in the past, it's usually been because we were concerned about that bottom line and saying, okay, we're going to roll the dice on more of those kids happening. We're in a good position and we want to build an extra cushion in there. Right now, I'm not seeing that, especially with such a big 8th grade class. I'm hard to believe that we're going to have to pay tuition bills for all of them.
So Morgan, for people who have been reading the news and seeing that there's an average projected 18% increase in their property taxes, and you're showing us what Berkshire, or rather NMV looks like. How do you explain that to people that, like, if you own a $200,000 house here in Berkshire, are you going to see a $600 increase in your property taxes?
So the first thing, there are a couple of things that I would say, depending on how well I know the people. The governor's message after the letter came out was interesting in that he's talked about different numbers than he has in the past. So I think they know that the tax rates are going down, but they also know that there are a lot of towns that have reappraised, so those property values are going up. There's probably still some significant movement in the CLA in some towns, and so the grand list for the state is going up. And so I think he's pointing to the most dire number that he can. So that's the first point. Second point is I had a conversation at a training that Lynn and I were at 5 weeks ago and was talking to the superintendent in another system who had done a lot of modeling with their business manager on their own and was projecting to me an over 50% increase in tax bills. And so that 18% is going to be average, but there are going to be some that are a lot closer to 0, and there are going to be some that are a lot closer to that 50. And so I think we kind of need to wait and see where those CLA numbers come out. The other piece of that is that the yield rate is lower than it would be if there weren't so many things that are coming out of the education fund that had in the past. And the big one is the universal meals. I'm certainly not saying that that's a bad program. I think it's great, but we're paying for that out of the ed fund, which means the legislature is passing this bill and you guys get to raise the money for it. And there are certainly other things.
PCBs, mental health.
Yeah.
So when you have those CLA numbers, will you be able to give us a ballpark percentage what we should see our tax bills go up by in NMV if we don't
The tax
have income
bill.
sensitivity built in?
We can take that projected rate and say, yeah, if you have a $200,000 house, this is what your tax bill should be before it comes to
You can't actually determine that completely until you get the final yield.
Which isn't
It's
until
after,
May.
right. Makes it a little complicated.
Right.
And obviously, the hope is that with this very low yield number in parts of the state where they do spend a lot of money and they're losing capacity, there may be kind of ratcheting back what their initial projections were. Because these numbers are all based on what we tell the AOE we think we're going
Right.
to spend back in November.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I just want to say one more thing about that. That 18% is based on a survey that's done to business managers around the state. That is just what's your gut at this point about where you're going to land before people have really completed their budgeting process. So this is a very rough projection of where people's original thinking was, but if we don't have finalized spending plans in our communities across the state, so it could be looking wildly different. It is going to be significant because of the changes, but it's difficult to look at that number and have any sense of certainty because of what it represents.
Last year it came pretty close, right, to the yield number?
It came
It was
extremely
8 point
close.
something, yeah.
Yep.
So it was very close, within a fraction of a percentage point, right?
Yep. And there was maybe 3 years before that where it was so off that none of us were even using it to warn budgets.
That's right.
There was another number that had been floated, and so okay, we really think it's going to be close for this. And even that wasn't close. And so this is the time, if there's a course correction that you want to give it to me. Otherwise, we will just be doing the sharpening our pencils over the next 4 weeks and, making sure that we're not missing anything big or that we're overstating anything big. And then I would come back to you in January with presumably the CLA and hopefully a passed SU budget, and so a solid number for the assessment, and we can go from there.
I had a question, Morgan, right at the beginning of the presentation with the slides of all the FTE and that highlighted FTE increases and addition of new staffing. Is that all still in the hypothetical realm, and if not, then do we need to go through those and make the final determination around which positions we're adding, which positions we're no longer going to include, like the health teacher? We can't seem to find someone to fill that spot. Where do we stand with
Right
that?
now, all of those positions are in the document that you have in front of you. And so if I get strong guidance to add or subtract, I will. Otherwise, we'll leave it in there until we meet in January.
Okay. Well, I just know we had a little bit of an issue around just that point, the music in Bakersfield, and the point 2, and whether we're going to keep that. So that is reflected in this current budget.
Correct.
And Rhoda, I know you said it earlier, but remind me around your music person. The ask for that extra FTE isn't necessarily because you're wanting more instructional elective time in music, but more because your person is finding it really difficult to plan and have necessary kind of hours in a week to do that work.
Yeah, because she's doing more than just general music for all of our kids, because she's built the program into such that we have 75% of our kids, grades 5 through 8, taking an instrument. And so she's doing lessons on, and chorus and band, all of those kinds of extra things, so that she doesn't in 4 days have enough time for planning and all of that. So if we want the program to stay kind of where it is and be that robust of a program, she's feeling like she needs that extra day.
So I would like to propose, Rhoda and I are meeting tomorrow to go over schedules, and I'd really like to see what that numerically looks like, because we have a problem now.
Yep.
If she's not getting her prep time, that has to be addressed now.
Yeah.
So something needs to come away from what she's doing in order to, because you're contractually obligated
Correct.
to make that happen.
Right.
So
Like,
we'll look at that, and then I would want a very clear plan about what that looks like. And this gives you a month to use the data tool that Morgan has shared with you. You can go in and push the buttons that I was pushing to see, and we can have the conversation about whether or not that makes sense to add it there in Bakersfield or not.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible for a teacher, because I know I've done it in the past and I don't know if it's allowed, whatever, if she says for the remainder of the year, I want to use my prep time to have lessons?
Which is currently what she's doing.
Which is what I'm sure what she's doing.
She has them built in.
Yes, I'm sure that's what she's doing.
To do
We should be having a conversation with the union, if that's the case, because that is not what's written in our master agreement.
No, and she is, those prep times are there currently. She's choosing to do that because she feels it's a need for kids.
Okay.
So I should clarify that for sure.
Morgan, do you mind? I just want to see one last time before we kind of sign off for the month. Can you go back to those slides of the FTE? I know there were a couple of them.
I have it actually pulled up already.
And I will also, I'll get this presentation out to you, because I know those charts are hard to read as well.
So question then, so with all these 0.5 of the health, this is looking, that's part of this person that we've been unable to find, or that's separate and distinct?
That's offset. So we had a district-wide, we still have a district-wide health position in there, shared across all 4 towns. That's the position we haven't been able to fill. We are pulling that out of the budget and replacing it with half-time in Berkshire, half-time in Montgomery,
Gotcha.
and then 1 in Sheldon.
Okay. And that Berkshire assistant principal position landed on the language of it being formally an assistant principal as far as the endorsement goes, and we had that issue.
So I want to address that, because last year that was an error in my thinking part, that we could go with a dean of students, because what I didn't anticipate is by going with a dean of students, that would immediately eliminate almost anyone who's been working in the education system, because it would have resulted in them needing to give up the benefit of their teacher retirement,
right.
because they would have had to have fallen under the municipal retirement, and that was not visible to me in my thinking when we first started talking about that.
Yes.
So if we're trying, what would be most helpful if we have a very skilled person, in an educator, a leader, going with the assistant principal is definitely where we would want to go.
Right, now I remember.
Yeah.
It was a while ago.
It was the municipal retirement thing that
Yes.
tripped me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I still don't understand why, why it falls under municipal.
know.
I would have never guessed that.
Mm-hmm. It's because it doesn't require a license.
Oh, there you go.
And then for the family engagement coordinators, I know we had prior funded those from ESSER. Now we need to pull them into the regular district budget. Are we anticipating that's gonna be one person who's gonna move between the schools?
2. So there's 1 in ESSER that's shared across 2 of 3 of the schools now, not all 4. So it would be not replacing that person, but instead of 1 FTE over 3 schools, it'll be a 1 FTE over Bakersfield Berkshire, and then a separate FTE over Montgomery, Sheldon.
Gotcha, okay. And Courtney, can I just see the one other slide for the staffing changes? Perfect.
So that's a reduction of the shared health.
Yes, I see that. And then the SRO would ideally be someone district-wide.
Yes.
Correct.
And I did have a conversation with Franklin County Sheriffs,
Oh, I
and they
see.
would be very interested
Okay,
in helping us to fill that position.
great. Okay, thanks, I appreciate it. Thanks, Morgan. It's a dizzying amount of numbers. I know it's a really heavy lift. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And then the only other thing on my report was informational, and that's that we're within one kid of our projected tuition payments. So I think that's the closest we've ever been.
Pretty good guess.
Nice. All right. So I know it's really late. So I feel as though we can skip a fair amount of board business. We're not gonna do that regional advisory board representative report, other than Kat, you wanna mention that again, Kat, that piece around Cold Hollow?
Yeah, Nate had just mentioned that the sending schools of NMV, they send their 8th graders to visit Cold Hollow Career Center on the 15th of December. So that's happening, I guess, next week. So yeah, and I'll give more information next month, but that's coming up.
Perfect, thanks, Kat, and we can add that to the agenda for next month, as well as that discussion on conferences and obviously more budget stuff. I think I'll skip my SU report, just really wanting to be mindful of what a long day it's been for everyone. You can find that last meeting on YouTube and play it at 1.5 times. Our next meeting will be January 3rd. Remember that we're now heading into the 3-month period where we meet in Enosburg. Night everyone gets to stay on paved roads, and it's a little more central given the treacherous driving conditions sometimes. So, anything else tonight,
Central
folks?
office as compared to Enosburg High School will be in the
Oh,
conference
sorry, I
room
said
as
central office,
You said
didn't I?
Enosburg. I just want to clarify which,
Oh, yeah, I'm
which
sorry,
part
I'm
of
so
town.
used to,
So-
yes, central office,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
And it will be January, February, March.
Yeah.
All right, anything else tonight, folks? All right, drive safe, thank you all so much. I'll make a motion to adjourn, we'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda, Lisa, and Mary is an aye. Thank you all so much.
Morgan, you don't have any.
Happy holidays, everyone.